This episode is sponsored by yet another incredible company that I stand behind fully, and that is Bubs Naturals. Now, I've not only used Bubs products for 4 years now, but I've also had the founder, Sean Lake, on the show twice. And they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order, and I will give you that code in a moment. Now, Bubs has a very powerful backstory. Glenn Bub Doherty is one of the 2 Navy SEALs killed protecting the CIA facility in Benghazi. And wanting to honor his best friend, Sean stood up this company. Now, it began with their flagship product, which is their collagen. And I have to say, as a Brit with really dry skin who's now 51, I cannot underline the importance of collagen in your diet. I have seen a huge positive impact on my skin, nails, hair, and most importantly, digestive system. Another thing that I use religiously is their MCT creamers. That's the part of coconut oil that is good for our brain. And they come in dairy and non-dairy, depending on your diet. Now, most recently, I've started adding in creatine to my diet. Another thing that I've been told is good for our brain health. And with so many of us being exposed to TBIs, concussions, and sleep deprivation, the positive brain health element of creatine is essential. Now, in addition, Bubs makes apple cider vinegar gummies, vitamin C, and their hydration product, Hydrate or Die. And several of these products are also NSF certified, which is the highest level of certification as far as efficacy and cleanliness. Now, one of the most important elements of this company, in my opinion, is that they are a social business, meaning 10% of their profits go to charity, and in this case, that is the Glenn Doherty Foundation. Now, as I mentioned before, they are offering you, the audience of the Behind the Shield podcast, 20% off your entire order if you use the code BTS at bubsnaturals.com. And if you want to hear more about the products, the backstory, and how Sean used Glenn's story to help other veterans, listen to episodes 558 and 1055 of the Behind the Shield podcast. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome on the show veteran firefighter and special operations team member, Rob Moore. Now, in this conversation, we discuss a host of topics, from Rob's journey into the fire service, firefighter fitness, the recruitment crisis, some of his notable career calls, his own powerful mental health story, refinding his faith, catharsis through sailing, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of over 1,200 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I introduce to you Rob Moore. Enjoy. Well, Rob, I want to start by saying thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So you have a pretty unique answer to the first question I always ask. Where on planet Earth are we finding you today?
Well, today, as it's been for a little while, it is in Merritt Island, Florida. My wife and I live aboard our boat, and the plan has been to travel, and we're still working towards that. We've had some setbacks, but yeah. So right now, Merritt Island, right next to Cape Canaveral, Cocoa Beach area.
Beautiful. Well, we'll get obviously to that transition and what you're hoping to do in a little bit. Let's start at the very beginning of your timeline then. So tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Okay, so I was born in Ohio, which I kind of I'm somewhat ashamed of and try to hide. I think I've probably lied about that before. Uh, because growing up in Florida since, I don't know, about kindergarten or first grade, kind of have a little bit of that Southern culture, feel that, wants to hide some of that Northern stuff. But now there's a lot of good folks up there. And anyways, born in Ohio. When I was very, very, very young, my family moved to Marietta, Georgia. My dad took a job there. And then when I was in between kindergarten and first grade, we moved to St. Cloud, Florida. And that's pretty much was the rest of it, on into the fire service and whatever else. But as far as a family goes, culturally, coming back to that north-south kind of a mutt, my mother was from South Carolina with, darling and honey and sugar and all that. And my dad was from the Boston area, south of Boston, and from Springfield, Mass. And so, kind of culturally have cousins on both sides of the fence, those that can't pronounce an R, and those that, sweet tea the spoon will stand up in the middle. But as far as the family dynamic, my dad at a young age was a church organist, and they both were teachers. And so, I was, church and all of that was a big part of our lives growing up. It was sort of mandatory. There was no way around that.
Well, I know we're going to get into spirituality in a little bit. When you reflect back now, growing up in that environment where you said church was there whether you liked it or not, did that, as you progress early life as far as an adult, keep you leaning into your faith, or did it push you away like some people find?
Early life, it kept me leaning in. I mean, as any other young kid, church was boring and I wasn't into it, and just you went because you didn't have a choice. I really, it meant a lot to me through probably my high school years and whatnot. It was very real to me. And so early life, I would say I leaned into it, into heading off to college and starting the fire service. And there was a time later on that I definitely decided that, I don't know, maybe it wasn't for me anymore, at that time anyway.
What about sports and exercise? What were you playing during the high school ages?
I went to a very small high school, believe it or not. And they didn't offer a ton. So I played basketball because it was pretty much, there was no football. There was definitely no hockey. So I played basketball. I wasn't very good at it. And, but I've, I did always grow up playing different sports. When I was younger, I played a little bit of hockey and whatnot, just with my dad. But that was about it for sports, I guess, as far as through high school anyway.
So we'll get to the police and fire hockey that you played later on. So that was the hockey influence, as your dad?
Yep. My dad having those Boston, New England kind of roots. He named me, this is a bit debatable if my family were sitting here, but him and I talked. There was a Boston Bruins player named Bobby Orr, and probably the greatest defenseman of all time. But he, Robert Gordon Orr was his name. So he named me Robert Moore. I don't know why my middle name wasn't Gordon, but I think he had to pick a middle name from a cousin or somebody else to honor someone else in the family. And so he named me after a great Bruins hockey player. And I, obviously didn't possess anywhere near that level of talent, but I had a lot of fun, and I grew up kind of playing with my dad a little bit, and him trying to tough me up and teach me a little bit about the game.
What about career aspirations? While you're still in high school, what were you dreaming of becoming?
Well, honestly, I think probably even in like 7th, 8th grade, I knew that I either wanted to join the Marine Corps, the Navy, which I know the two of those give each other a lot of crap, but I wanted to be either, because I've always loved the ocean, I either wanted to be a full-time sailor or Marine, or either police or fire. I hadn't really decided, but I knew one of those. And my dad and mom had been, teachers and professors. And, it was like through high school when I was voicing that, it was like I was, I was in trouble, so to speak. It was like, no, that's not happening. You're going to college. That's not even an option. You're going to college. So that was what I explored. That's what I had wanted. I think on career day in high school, I had gone down to the fire station in St. Cloud and talked to some of the guys, and was just really impressed with just how laid back and genuine they were. How they picked on each other, but out of a sense of brotherhood and love. You know what I mean? It was just, I really liked those guys. I thought they were cool. My dad had owned a daycare center and a Christian school in St. Cloud. And when I'd work there after school in high school, the kids that would get picked up early, 3:30, 4 o'clock, they hadn't barely been out of school a while, by their dads, and their dads would come out and play basketball with the other kids or football if we were playing with the kids. And they were fun guys. And I was like, man, what does this guy do for a living? He's picking his kid up at like 3:30. And, they were firemen, they just let their kids basically go to after school for an hour or two to play. And they were always like the most laid back, kind of just good guys to hang out with. So that started steering me that way through high school. I was like, yeah, I definitely am interested in that career.
With both of your parents being in education, did you have any conversations with them as far as the evolution or devolution of education throughout their career?
No. My parents, I think, and I'm not faulting them for anything, no one's perfect. And, of course, I think in that era, you know what I mean? That it was more like they weren't explained much to them by their parents. They were just told, do this and shut up, And I think, there was some of that sort of left over. They didn't really know how to articulate or explain things clearly. It was just like, they really were looking out they thought what was best for you. And you're just supposed to do that and not ask a lot of questions. So no, I don't think we really had deep conversations about that.
Well, with that being said, obviously we're going to talk about, your mental health journey. One thing that I really began just seeing over and over again through all these interviews that I did was the prevalence of childhood struggles, trauma, in people that then ended up putting a uniform on, first responders, military, etc. And there's science behind showing that we have an ACE, an adverse childhood experience score of 6 out of 10, most of us, as do incarcerated people. So, it's all about that crossroads. When you reflect back now, were there elements of your upbringing you think that contributed to struggles later in life?
Honestly, James, and I promise I'm not hiding anything. This whole interview is one I felt that literally God asked me to do. I don't, it's not, I wasn't excited about like kind of bearing my soul for the world. But no, I can swear on a Bible that it's like I didn't have, any of those abuses. You know what I mean? That like by today's standards, being told no, I guess could be, and my parents were strict. They were very, there's consequences for your actions. If you mess up, if you screw up, then you weren't going to just get a pass. But I was never, beat with an inch in my life, and I was never, there wasn't those traumas that I associate with, I think, what you're probably leaning towards. So no, I honestly don't think so,
Yeah, and then that happens too, which is that it's important to look at the backgrounds of people that did struggle, look at the backgrounds of people that didn't, people kind of in the middle. And I've said this, on here many, many times. I did have a lot of shit in my early life, but what was interesting for me is for every bad experience, there was, what we now know as a healing modality woven into my upbringing. So I grew up on a farm. So we had all people from all walks of life, come through the doors. My dad was a veterinary surgeon. We were healing animals. We were eating real food. We were getting dirty. We were cold. We were wet. All the things that we know kind of create resilience and help you offload. And I'm one of 5 kids. So we were kind of feral children that, probably gave each other unofficial therapy throughout the whole thing. So I think, whatever someone's childhood looks like, it's really important to just kind of look at it and go, right, were there elements that were negative? Were there elements that were positive? So that as you factor through, you start seeing these common denominators of what seems to be a healthy, processing mechanism in life. And then, as we know, like shoving things down, not talking about them, for example, what's an unhealthy way of coping?
Right. And I'm sure there was, if I had to sort of draw from what you just said, there was definitely some of that. My dad, when we moved to St. Cloud, that's when he bought the daycare and started the Christian school. And it was grind, all the work. And I actually liked it. I liked kind of trying to impress my dad with a work ethic and how much I could get done. But yeah, it wasn't like I said, I think by that day's standards, it wasn't that different than anyone else's. But it wasn't one where it was like, let's discuss how you feel. Or, when you messed up and got punished for it, there was no like, they're coddling later, it was just, shut up, deal with it, kind of thing. And I guess as far as going to the career, when I told, like when I voiced to my family in high school and whatnot, that, I really felt that I wanted to look at the fire service. Um, I think honestly, my dad sort of pre-explored it for me. He had been in human resources in the corporate world for a while, and just kind of felt like it was going to be really hard at that time for me to get hired, and that I'd be wasting my time. When I look back now, I never got an explanation from him then. I basically just got told like it's not going to work out, and all I heard was like him kind of saying, "I don't think you can do it," you know, like yeah, and I guess that I've always kind of had a little bit of that stiff upper lip. If someone tells me I can't do something, my first impulse is like, "Oh, okay, let's see." Let me see if I can prove you wrong. But yeah, I guess that would be it. As far as that thread goes.
What year was it that you were trying to get into the fire service?
Well, I graduated high school in '94. Yeah, we're starting to get old, James. I don't know if you know, but and so I wanted to go then, and like I said, it wasn't an option. So I ended up going to college in Virginia from Florida, and I went 2 years. I had like a work study scholarship. I worked in college basketball and Division I athletics. Because when I went to college, I thought, okay, fine. If I have to pick something, that's going to make my parents happy, I was pursuing basically sports marketing and sports broadcasting. I really thought that I could either do that or get into coaching, because I really value, like reading books on leadership. I like different, examining different styles of leadership. And I thought maybe, I could derive a meaningful life from leading others, even if it was just in sports. And I was pursuing that path, but after 2 years of college, and I was busting my hump. I've never been a student that can just read it and get it. I have to drill on it constantly. And so, I mean, I was really grinding hard to barely pull like a B average, and then of course working in athletics for my scholarship. After 2 years, I was done. I was miserable. I knew that the path I was on wasn't what I wanted. I'm like, this is not what I want to do with my life. There was just no passion or energy for it at all. I'm like, this is just not going to work out. And I remember I'd come home and for the summer, and I was working as a lifeguard. I don't know if anyone remembers, there was a water park in Orlando called Water Mania. And it was kind of awesome. It was also kind of a dive towards the end, but but I was working at this like nothing job, making nothing money. And, but I was making a rescue from time to time. I was, jumping in the wave pool and getting somebody that I spotted that was going down. And, there was always like an off-duty firefighter working in the EMS office as an EMT or a paramedic. And, I'd always end up talking with them and joking with them, and they'd invite me out for drinks and whatnot. And that summer, making no money, but what felt like making a difference, saving someone's life from time to time. Maybe not as dramatic, but definitely if they'd have been ignored, it could have gone really bad. And I don't know. I knew that summer that I wasn't going back to college, and it was hard because I was, I remember sitting on the lifeguard chair for agonizing hours. Like, am I being a total spoiled brat? Like, am I being a jerk? How many kids don't have the opportunity I have, to go, and here I am and I'm going, and I'm gonna ditch, I was really struggling with like, am I being a complete selfish jerk here? Back and forth to what I want to do with my life. And when I finally decided, like, yep, that's it. Yeah, having that conversation with my dad was probably one of the scariest times I've ever had, because I really thought he was just gonna like explode, unload on me, call me stupid, the whole 9 yards. And he didn't. It went different. And if you want me to tell you that, I will. But
yeah, please.
I remember telling him, I was, like I said, I was terrified, but I remember telling him, like, Dad, I'm not asking you. I'm respectfully telling you, like, man to man. But I want to make it clear that I'm not asking you for your permission or blessing on this, but this is just what I got to do. Like, I'm not going back to Liberty, not going back to college. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to pursue my EMT and my fire standards, and I'm going to be a fireman. Like, I know that's what I want to do. I know it through and through 100%. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or a jerk, but I'm just telling you that's it's decided. And he just got quiet. He was cooking fish on the grill, and he got really quiet. And like this, he'd normally just kind of let me have it if he thinks I'm being stupid. which is what I expected. And it was killing me because I thought, like, come undone, like, let me have it. You know what I mean? Like, and he must have told mom, because after dinner, instead of helping to clean up, he just is like, okay, let's go talk. And I thought, okay, here we go. And he later kind of denied this, but it happened. And my dad and I got along great. We had our rough patches, but we got along great, especially later in life, which I'm really thankful for. But he sat me down and he said, okay, well, it sounds to me like you've got it all figured out, and you want to be a big man. You want to make all your own choices and decisions. Fine. The room you're living in, you can have till the end of the month because you're my kid, but the first of the month, the rent's due. And he set some rent price that was lower than I could get anywhere else. And he's like, and if you don't pay it, I'll put your stuff on the sidewalk and change the locks. And I knew he meant it. And he's like, and the food in the cupboards and in the refrigerator, that's your mom and I's. You need to do your own groceries. We won't eat your food, but don't get caught eating ours or I'll bill you for it. Your vehicle you're driving, we had made a deal that when I graduated college, he was going to give me the title. He had kind of given me a decent Jeep to drive around through college. It was probably a little nicer than what I rated at that stage of life. And he's like, the deal was, this is, when you graduate, don't expect anything big because, you'll have it to use in college. So he said, well, you broke the arrangement on that deal. So you're going down to the bank tomorrow and I'm going to co-sign and you're buying me out of it. You're making payments on it to the bank. And if you don't make the payment, they'll take it. It's not my problem. And you need to get your own insurance, but the whole 9 yards. It was like, and I hope you can figure out how to still work and go to school because, if you're doing this, you're doing it on your own 2 feet. You know what I mean? Like you need to do this all on your own. And he said, and you have 2 years to get it done, in my opinion, because at that point you should have been, would have been a junior. So he's like, so if you haven't pulled it off in 2 years, then you need to get your butt back to college. And I saw it as it lit a fire. It definitely left me walking like, okay, all right, game on. You know what I mean? Like almost like it kind of, he didn't say you can't do it or I don't think you'll do it, but it kind of felt like, all right, I had something to prove. And instead of going out for beers after work at the water park, whatever, it was like, nope, every little dime matters. And, I just started grinding, and got through EMT, went through fire standards in 90. So this would have been like 96, 97. And maybe even 95, 96, I guess, somewhere in there. I may be a little off, but I do remember that I was finishing up the fire academy there at Mid-Florida Tech. And somebody from the U.S. Navy came in, which was kind of funny because I was like, wait, what? And they were looking for temporary firefighters for the Orlando Naval Training Center for the base. Because of base closure, all their permanent guys were moving on. And so they were like, this doesn't lead to a full career. It's just temporary status. Who's interested? And the pay was pretty terrible. But only 2 people raised their hands, me and one other guy. Everybody else was like an electrician or a plumber. They were making pretty good money. And I was a lifeguard at a water park making nothing. So even though the money wasn't great, it was a raise. And I saw it as a way in, a resume builder. And I took the job. It was awesome. Driving on the base every morning. I really liked that culture, that really stringent set rules and times and raise the flag. And, that was the good side of it. And it was a resume builder. The bad side was it was a Navy base, and military bases. It's really against the rule to do anything stupid versus private sector. So you're not going to catch like a lot of good fire or entrapments because it's against the rules to be stupid. So like, you're going to run a few medical calls and that was about it, and I was kind of bored to tears because I was so, young and just really wanting to play. And I'm like, man, this is slow.
Was that the naval base near Station 73?
Off of Bennett and 50 area over there. I'm not, tell you the truth, I never worked that side of Orange County much. So I'm trying to think. It's like at 436 and 50. If you take that a little bit west, and there's a road called Bennett, it's kind of in that area of Orlando.
Okay, because I'm trying to remember. That sounds like a different part. But when I worked at 73, sometimes we'd go there, and I know Orlando had a fire, and I remember it because it was a former naval base. It was derelict when I got there, but they had re-roofed the houses. So Orlando had done a vertical ventilation, only to discover that all they've done was just open a hole in the fake roof, and they had the flat roof underneath it. But I can still see it in my mind.
Probably that may have been the annex base. It was down by the airport.
Yeah, that's what
Yep.
it was. Yeah,
Okay.
that one.
Yeah, main base was engine 18. And then I can't remember, it was engine. The old school guys would fillet me for not remembering, but the main base was engine 18, which I was on most of the time. And there was an annex base, I think it was like 74 or 5 or something. I don't know, 17 maybe. I don't know. I'm getting that all wrong, but I know there was an annex down there, and I would go work. I'd get floated down there sometimes. So yeah, that sounds right.
So how competitive was it around this time when you were trying to get hired for a full-time career gig?
Oh, I was kicking every door that I could kick. I tested with St. Cloud, Kissimmee, Osceola County, Orange County, Orlando, Brevard County. Like if somebody was offering a test, I was taking it. And where I was very fortunate is that most times when you're working any job and you think, you want to explore and go somewhere else, you kind of have to hide that from your current employer. You know what I mean? You can't be very open about that. And they knew they were running out on me, that they were going to let me go when they finally closed. So my shift commander literally was a master chief. He was awesome. He was terrifying, but he was awesome. If there was a test going on somewhere, they would just drop the rig to 3, give me a Navy base pickup. I didn't even have to drive my personal vehicle, and I could drive to Brevard County on shift, to take a written exam or to do a practical. And they would let me train and practice nonstop on shifts. So it was really great in that regard. One side note there where life could have ended up very different, and I might not have met you or known anyone I know in my life now, is towards the end of that, it was really winding down. And they came to me and said, okay, you're a GS3, just like no money. And you're a temporary status GS3. I need to know by next shift. Well, the federal service is 24/24. There's no C shift, right? So when you work in overtime, it's a 72-hour run at work. And then you have one day off and come back. You had a Kelly day, but I don't even remember how it worked. You worked a lot of hours. And they came to me and said, you can go from a GS3 to a GS13, a 10-step pay raise, which is something odd in the county to think about steps. And but they came and said, you can go up 10 steps and you'll be permanent status. And we need to know by next shift. And there's 2 assignments you can have. Either one, whatever you can fit in a Connex box, including your Jeep, you can move. One was a naval, I think an air base in Italy. And the other one was Key West Naval Air Station. And being a fisherman and a surfer and a water guy, I was like, ooh. I was quite tempted really on either one. I was like, man, I can move to Italy or I can move to the Keys. And I can live in the Keys affordable because it's on-base housing. You're shopping at the PX. I'm like, it just, I was like, yep, I'm doing it. I was very excited about it. And I had some pretty big decisions to make. And I had like 24 hours to figure it out, to get my answer. And it was a long 24 hours. But ultimately I decided, I'm like, I started down this path to be a fireman. I want to be a fireman. I don't want to just be one in title. I don't want to just tell my friends or neighbors that that's what I am. I want to be one. I want to play. I want to do what one does. And I struggled with it, and I didn't have a job anywhere. I was on Orlando's list, Orange County's list, Osceola County's list, and I think either St. Cloud or Kissimmee, I can't recall, but I was on 3 or 4 lists. As you've done everything, you're on the list somewhere. We might get to you, we might not, as far as offering employment. And it's a tough call to make, but I went in and told Master Chief Williams, I said, with all due respect, I'm going to have to politely decline. And you stood at like parade rest and saluted. And, he said, I remember being young and dumb. He said, you're being an idiot. He said, but I get it. He said, I understand. And he's like, good luck to you. And so, yeah, that job went away, and it actually completely went away. And I wasn't picked up anywhere yet. I was still on everyone's list. Went to work for an ice rink in Kissimmee. And as long as I'm bearing my soul, I think I might win the award for the world's most embarrassing job. I went in there to the ice rink because I thought, well, I'll be a skate guard. I get to spend a ton of time on the ice. I'll get to play more hockey. You know what I mean? Who cares? It's a nonsense job, but, it's a job. And it was like I'd been there maybe 3-4 days. And they said, well, it's a kid's birthday party. You got to put on the purple dinosaur. I'm like, what? So I've been Barney on ice, I guess, if you will, with kids hanging off you. And it was terrible. At least you had the head on. Nobody could tell it was you. but just waiting to get the call somewhere, And I remember in the same week, I got letters from both Osceola County and Orange County. In the meantime, I had been volunteering for Osceola County. I don't know if you recall John Haskett.
Yeah, yeah, yep,
Uh, John Haskett and John Byrne. I know you know. I know
yeah.
Byrne's still one of my best friends to this day. Um, uh, they were out there at Kings Point, and I had started at Kissimmee Heights as a volunteer in Osceola County and BVL area, and they were like, "Man, you need to come out here to Kings Point. Come out here with us." And um, I still to this day feel like there's nothing about the fire service that John Haskett doesn't know off the top of his head, and then he's not making it up. So I went out there because I was like, man, these guys are impressive. There was a couple Orlando guys out there too, and it was just guys that really knew the craft, And I thought, yeah, I definitely want to volunteer out here because it's just a chance to learn a bunch more. And yeah, so I went out there and I was volunteering for Osceola, and I ended up getting a letter from Orange County and Osceola in the same week. And the thing that had kind of turned me cold towards Osceola County, or I probably would have gone there, was I'd gone through their whole process, and I sat in their interview, and I had worked. There was really bad tornadoes that had gone through Central Florida in like 96, 97 ish. And they were pretty terrible. It was like some F4s, and it was pretty significant damage. And I had been working at the Navy base at the time, but that night I was off. My pager went off, and I went out and responded, and I worked a lot of that with John Byrne, and it was probably my first introduction into real nasty trauma, as far as fire service, seeing what you see. It was pretty gnarly. It was bad. And, I worked that for like, I don't know, 16, 18-hour day. I was exhausted. I had to go back to the Navy base the next day. The PTSD counselor that night, sort of ashamed to say that I think Byrne and I both made her cry and maybe quit being a counselor because they put us in this tent. We were exhausted, and he had to go to work in Orange County the next day, I think, and I had to go to the Navy base, and we were just exhausted. And she just kept needling us, and she was pretty young and pretty naive, just didn't really have a lot of background dealing with firefighters. And she kept needling to how do you feel and how do you feel and how do you feel? And I just didn't feel like talking. I just felt quiet. And I knew I wasn't going to go home and hurt myself or hurt anyone else. I was just, I just didn't know how to process everything I was dealing with. I just felt quiet. And so I just kept saying, I'm fine. I'm good. I'm good, because like I said, I knew I wasn't going to hurt myself or do anything dumb. I just wasn't really sure how to connect the dots on everything else that I was dealing with. I had found a 2-year-old in a pond that they'd been looking for for about, I don't know, day and a half or so. So, or maybe that's not true. Couldn't have been. It was the night after. I got that part wrong. But anyway, nonetheless, she kept needling, and Byrne's just kind of looking at me, and he's getting mad, and I'm getting mad. And finally, I just let her have it. I'm like, you want to know how I feel? You really want to know how I feel? And I just unloaded. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of being a jerk. Like both barrels, I just let her have it. I just like painted this picture of the whole scene and just kind of how disturbing and disgusting the whole thing was. And she started crying. I'm like, oh no, 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 no. I'm like, no, we're not done. And I just kept letting her have it. Cause I'm like, you want to know how I feel? I'm like, how do you think I feel? And I just let her have the whole thing. And I think she sort of decided maybe that counseling firefighters wasn't for her. And I guess I shouldn't be laughing. I'm not really proud of that. But, it was kind of like I wasn't ready to talk about it. And I just got needled to the point of like, you're not allowed to go home until you open up. So it wasn't pretty when I did. But yeah, so that being said, I went to Osceola County's interview, right? And they were like, oh yeah, you're a volunteer for us. You have been for a while now. You're working at the Navy base. I remember the chief was like, that's unreal that you work sometimes 72-hour shifts, and then you still find time to volunteer for us. And he's like, and I remember you working the tornado with us. That was, how you doing? Are you okay? And I'm like, wow. I was thinking like, I'm in. I was like, these guys know me. Like I'm in. And he got to the end of the interview and said, we really like to hire from volunteer numbers that we see are a little higher, than what you've been turning in. And I'm thinking like, you just painted to me the picture of how busy I am with many times 72-hour shifts and still coming around for a little bit for volunteering. And you basically just told me face to face, which I guess I appreciate. Yeah, we're not going to hire you. And I was like, I just sat there kind of quiet for a minute. I'm like, okay, sir, appreciate your time, and thank you. Look forward to hopefully working with you. And politely left. And I thought, man, that was ridiculous. So when I got letters later on that month or the next month from both agencies, I was already heavily leaning towards Orange County. So I was like, Osceola County could have hired me a couple weeks ago or a month ago, whatever. And, now they're getting around me on the second hiring. And the thing is, too, they hired a bunch of guys from down south that hadn't even been volunteers with them. So yeah, I was pretty annoyed. I was like, the whole thing was bull. So I remember talking to John Haskett. I'm like, what would you do? And John Haskett's wisdom, he said, well, if you really want to be a battalion chief in 10 years, you got to go to Osceola County. He's like, they're a young agency and there is more room to move up than you can imagine. He's like, but if you don't really care about being like all the bugles and the stars so quick, and he's like, but you're looking for greater stations and more opportunities to do different things, he's like, then I'd go to Orange County. And like I said, I was already kind of a little butthurt with Osceola. And so, yeah, I called up Orange County Human Resources like the day like the next day after I got that letter or whatever, and said, yep, I appreciate it. I accept the offer. And I started with Orange County in July of 98.
It's interesting because I've had a few conversations with people that were on before me. And, when we look back 20 years ago, for example, the level of recruitment, the level of desire to be a firefighter, and the massive lists that we created for a handful of jobs, a lot of times we're like, yeah, but that was post 9/11. But actually, that's bullshit, because if you listen to people that were trying to get hired at the end of the 90s, it's the exact same story. Now, yeah, I'm sure 9/11 added a few more. And I went to school 0304, mid-Florida Tech, so a few years later than you. But, this is what I'm trying to paint the picture with this crisis that we're in now, is listen to people that were trying to get hired 25, 30 years ago, even 10 years ago, and how competitive it was and how it is now. It's not air quotes because kids don't want to work anymore. It's because there's been something that's been broken for a long, long time. And we can get back to the huge, demand for our profession and choose that top tier. But we have to fucking acknowledge that there's something wrong, because it wasn't that long ago that people were fighting for years to be, just get one job in one department. Now you can bounce all over the place and get hired wherever you want.
You're so right. I mean, it blows my mind that, recruitment and I'm not knocking it, but like paid for this and paid for that to go to school to try it out. And I'm like, man, like you were almost ready to shiv your brother in line, when you were taking a test for Orlando. I remember showing up to Orlando's written test, and the rumor mill was there was like maybe 13 or 14 jobs. And there was like, I think it was given in the arena or something. I mean, or at the Bob Carr, there was like, a couple, 300-400 people or more ish showing up for like a dozen or 14 jobs. And you got to figure, you didn't know it then because you were young and naive, that probably half of those were already taken by somebody's chief's kid. So in reality, there was 300-400 people competing for like 4 or 5 jobs. You had to be absolutely the best of the best. You could not afford to have a bad day on a test day, or you weren't. Nope, it's not happening.
Well, and this is the thing. I mean, when I went through, you guys, say our county, Orange, had just done a non-cert. I think it was a class right before us, and there was some freaking amazing firefighters that came through that. But for everyone that had to work full time and then go to school on weekends and evenings and, do their fitness somewhere in between and then try and get to all these tests and get these packets around their work hours, you then don't question the commitment for that kind of candidate versus a non-cert. And obviously, the non-cert has a place too, especially in underserved areas where they just can't afford to put themselves to school. So I think
agreed.
There's a place
and
for both.
I didn't mean to sound like I'm kicking non-certs. There's some of the ones I served with were, phenomenal.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully I didn't come off sounding.
No, you didn't. You didn't. But it's a nuanced conversation. But the point is, this is a profession where you need to be able to take that top 10%. When I talk to ocean lifeguards, for example, like that's a premier group of men and women that, fitness is not an option, and they have mandatory testing and they have to recert because, your child dies at a beach. That's unforgivable. And the same with our profession, with fitness levels and, training levels and all these other areas. And I think the missing piece, though, is providing that environment to promote performance. And we'll get to that, obviously, with Orange County as well. But this is what we need to get back to, taking everyone on the list, which, locally here, that's what they do. They go into high schools now and begging every
I know.
18-year-old they can find to come. They'll put them
And
through
it blows my
school,
mind
EMT school. Yeah. And then what is the
because,
potential? You're going to
and
have problems.
they're not painting, I don't think, a fair picture of what you're getting into.
No.
I've told like some of my nieces or nephews and some young kids I know that when they ask me about it, I'm like, listen, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me. It also can be one of the worst things. I'm like, you have to want to do this. I mean, you have to want it. If you're just trying it out or it's better money than fast food, like I don't think it's a smart choice. You're wasting your time because there's so much to it that isn't in the brochure, that that can get pretty heavy, and you got to really want it because, there was times towards the end when I didn't want it, I didn't want it at all. And I thank God above for getting me through to the end, still feel like a little bit of a wimp sometimes for only doing 25, but.
Well, I only did 14, so I must be a giant pussy.
No, no. Yeah, all right. So you make me sorry.
Well, my exit story is unique though. But so if I'm doing the math,
James, you're making a difference. You're making a difference. You're out there serving still. You're still serving.
Yeah, it's definitely
I'm
the
doing
same
this
mission.
interview. You're doing all of it.
Well, if my math is right, when you entered Orange County, was that only like 10-ish years after the consolidation where all the small towns became Orange County? I think that was the 80s, wasn't it?
This is where I don't want to disrespect the history and get it wrong and have some of my former mentors get mad at me. So I'm just going to go, yeah, probably ish. I think, was it 1981? It was 81, I believe, on the old patch that said they were consolidated. So I started in 98, July of 98. So 81 to 91 would be 10 years. So yeah, 10 plus, but not a ton more than that, So 98, yeah, I guess almost, yeah. So quite a bit more than that.
So what did it look like at the front door then? Were you seeing kind of the ripple effect of some of these smaller departments still, or was it unified by the time you walked through the door?
I would say mostly unified in the, like, I don't know, 90-ish%. There was still some people from the district days that, for either just it's what they came from and knew, kind of holding on to that. That south side of town where I've spent most of my career, you had the Pine Castle boys and what's the one over there where Byrne used to work? Over there by the lakes.
Yeah, Pine Castle was actually where we were, I think. It was us and 51, wasn't it? But then you had Edgewater.
Yeah, but no, there was something else. He's going to be like, man, I can't believe you got that wrong.
And then Taft as well. Wasn't Taft its own thing too?
Taft. There was Taft over there. And yeah, there was, so there was a little bit of that. I think guys just kind of hanging on to where they came from, but not a ton,
And what about losing Mark and Todd in the line of duty death? Was that right before you got there?
That was before I got there. I had been volunteering a course with Byrne, and that hit him really hard. That was, it was eye-opening a bit to me. Like when we went to the fire academy, I think they spent the first 3 or 4 days showing nothing but firefighter funerals, interviewing widows, children of fallen firefighters. They really drove it home that, yes, you could serve this whole career and retire healthy, or you could serve 3, 4, 5 years and go in the ground. They made it very clear, like, the inside of your coat says, this is dangerous and it can kill you. And, they drove that home. But yeah, the Mark and Todd loss, I didn't know them. Obviously, we studied that fire deeply as Orange County, and as we should. But knowing guys that knew them, kind of watching, the effect on them. And I know to this day, there's a song by Mike and the Mechanics, In the Living Years, that I know was at their funeral because Byrne educated me on that. And to this day, when I hear it, it's weird because I wasn't there, but I still have almost a respect and memory towards them in regards to that.
When I went through fire school, we just had the Osceola training fire fatalities. And then I think Miami, Hialeah also had that one in their kind of Connex burn building as well, where the student got lost. So I entered and they'd had a bunch of local line of duty deaths and in training. So, it was a bizarre time because, yeah, I mean, it was kind of confusing. And you expect to see these losses as a naive, recruit. You expect to lose firefighters going in to save kids, but the concept that you could get killed in training was mind blowing back then.
Right. I remember that. I remember that closely because obviously knowing quite a bit of Osceola County guys, and I knew some of the instructors that were wrapped up in that. That was tough. I mean, talk about something that's just really hard to deal with.
Absolutely, yeah. The video as well, just seeing the kind of silhouette of the fire in the Osceola one was just heartbreaking.
Mm.
So, talk to me about the orientation back then. What was the front door look like in Orange County?
I remember Greg Pines was a big guy in regards to introduction to Orange County. I liked him right out of the gate. I'm like, this is kind of what I wanted. I wanted sort of that more paramilitary. I wanted somebody in my face yelling a little bit. I was looking for that discipline, and Pines was good at that with his trooper hat, that he'd put on your forehead when he yelled at you. I got hired with some phenomenal people, and Shaky was one of them. I don't know how much time we have, but Shaky, day one, I was Shaky. He was just, I won't detail too bad, but he was acting up and he was being crazy. John Goodness was in my class. A lot of great guys. I could go on and on, but Shaky, when I came in to sit down in the portables there at the fire academy, there wasn't really, I thought I was plenty early. There wasn't a lot of seats. So I ended up kind of sitting near the front, right next to Shaky. Didn't really know anybody. And he just starts cutting up and messing around with me as Pines is giving this speech about how your name's written in pencil and it'd be easier to fire you than write you up. And you know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. And I, like you said, you fight so hard to get that job that in my mind, I'm like, this is not getting messed up. You know what I mean? I'm like, not happening. I'm in the door. Like no mistakes will be made. And Shaky's messing around and he's like whispering to me and I'm just looking dead ahead. And occasionally I'm just looking, I'm like, shut up. And he's just cutting up and being crazy. And he got Pine's attention and Pine chewed him out. And he let him have it, as he should have. And he gets done. He starts going back on his speech. And Shaky's like, I bet he's a really nice guy. Most guys that yell like that are just great guys. We're going to end up best friends later. I just know it. And he's like, and he thinks, and he's like acting like he's whispering, but he's being kind of loud, and I'm just going like, oh, dude, shut up. And so Pines is like, lets him have it again. And he lets him know like one more time and you're gone. Of course, Shaky does it again. So he's like, that's it. And Pines goes back to the office that was kind of behind all the chairs. Everybody's kind of turning looking. And he's like getting paperwork together. And he was probably just, like scaring him, but we didn't know. And he's getting paperwork together. And Shaky jumps up and he's like, no, it's like a scene out of Blues Brothers. You know what I mean? Like, please, I swear to God, I'll be good. He jumps up and like runs back there. And he's like, I swear to God, I'm sorry, I can be good. I swear to God. And he yanks the papers out of Pine's hands, shoves them on his dress shirt, and grabs a stapler off the counter and opens it up and sticks it on his chest and claps it like 5 or 6 times, stapling the paperwork to his chest. He's like bleeding through his dress shirt. And he's like, I swear to you, I'll bleed for you. I'll do anything. I'll be good. And he's like, literally like straight out of Blues Brothers. I'm like, oh my God. Everybody's sitting there like, what in the hell is happening? And, Pines was like, get out, and so we're like, oh my God, this guy's gone first day. And obviously they didn't fire him. They put him, they picked squad leaders. They made me one, put him in my squad. I'm like, oh, awesome. We got in such good shape because Shaky was because the extra push-ups and the extra laps that we earned constantly. But it was during that first drill when we were all out front lined up that Pines was explaining to some of the other instructors who was who. And he said, in that one right there, I'm not so sure about him. He's a little shaky. And, that was my version of how it stuck. I've heard a couple others, but that was what I saw. And, what a great human he was. But man, he did not know how to hold them. You know what I mean? In a setting when you're supposed to shut up, he wasn't good at that at all.
It's funny you say about Chief Pines. I remember he had that smoke reading class. So that I mean, this was, whatever it was by
Mm-hmm.
that point, 4 or 5 years into my career. And I was blown away. I was like, why haven't anyone really explained to me that when you're in dense, dark smoke, that you're in this big cloud of
Fuel.
gasoline, yeah, that could, ignite, and that's it, you're done. So I was super enamored of that until he said that the British firefighters don't go interior. And then I was like, okay, well, I'll take the part on smoke reading, but the other part is absolute bullshit. So you just kind of
Well, and I get it. You're
negated it a
like,
little bit.
I'm not hearing you anymore. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So what
yep.
about fitness standards and mental health conversations at the front door back then?
I mean, the fitness standard, I guess I was maybe a little bit disappointed in. You know what I mean? I kind of expected it to be like you mentioned, ocean lifeguards, and I expected it to be like, hardcore. Like, here's the standard, and reasonable enough, but here's the standard. And if you don't make it, bye. And I kind of, people aren't stupid. They can look around and read the writing and realize that, some of these people aren't cutting it, and you're like, they're not going to make it. And then they do. And you didn't really witness them evolve to the point of making it, making that standard. So you're like, okay, they don't really mean it. You know what I mean? Like, the standard isn't really the standard. So I guess I was deep down kind of a little bit disappointed in that. I really thought that should have been legitimate, and you're kind of noticing that it was a pretty gray area. But I've always really enjoyed health and fitness and working out. So me personally, I was just like, okay, that's it. Who cares what they hold other people to? I want to hold myself to what I know, I should be. And so I guess I just kind of rolled my eyes. I was like, all right, whatever. I'm not going to care about that. Did you mention mental health as well?
Yeah. What was the conversation at the beginning?
There really weren't any. Like, honestly, there really kind of weren't. It was like, if you run a tough call, like I remember when that volunteer call with the tornadoes with John Byrne, the CSIM meeting did nothing. Byrne's sitting next to me, kind of putting his hand on my shoulder, and looking at him. And he's like, I think he probably had a cigarette. And he's like, you good?
And a Mountain Dew on the other hand.
Yeah. But I knew that anything I could say wouldn't be judged. And I knew that this was somebody, he was right there along with me with those calls. He was the diver in the water when I was running the rescue boat, when we were looking for bodies, you know what I mean? And, we worked hand in hand on a lot of that. And so I knew there wasn't anything that I was feeling that would have been wrong to say, and I didn't know how to articulate how I felt or what I was thinking, or because it's just this blur of just felt like somebody just shocked your brain. They you got this like white noise. You can't make sense of it. And so throughout calls earlier in my career in the county that were kind of heavy, there was usually a senior person that would come alongside you. Sometimes your lieutenant, sometimes an engineer or a senior firefighter that would come along and be like, hey, you good? And you knew that if you wanted to talk about it, you could, and you weren't going to get judged, and you weren't going to get called a pussy, or, what I mean? You could say whatever needed to be said. It'd be okay. And, but there was no formal, there really wasn't any. It was kind of funny because, the Osceola County had made me go to one as a volunteer, and in Orange County, kind of out of the gate, if you ran something heavy, that was just kind of like, and I could be misspeaking here, but I'm just thinking back the best I can. I'm not trying to talk too negative, but I don't think there was a lot of that going on, to almost in my memory, I just can't think that really was a thing. It was a brother or a sister. Somebody came along with like, hey, that's so, or they might even really like let you know it was okay by saying, so that was a tough one. How you doing? And you're like, yeah, that sucked, And so, that was about the extent of it as far as mental health. You were kind of a little bit your crew or maybe on your own.
2013 is when I left. And it's funny because some people might think I left because of this bad shift. I had already put my papers in, and then the bad shift happened because obviously the universe was like, all right, James, you want to leave? Okay, here's a shift for you. But the first one of the day, I was finally assigned to the engine. I was a new paramedic and on the SKU all the time. And we had a GI bleed code. We ran it. Like, I have never had a code save my whole career, so yet another person died. Get back to the station. I'm a single dad at this point, and told not only am I going back to the rescue, but also that I'm going to get mandatory yet again the next shift. And so I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I'd already put my papers in with Reedy Creek because, I'm looking for somewhere where they can't tell me I can't go home to my child when I'm a single parent. And I hadn't done the medical yet, so I wasn't all the way through. But I was like, you know what? I'm done. So I put my papers in. I'm like, find someone for next shift. You don't need 2 weeks. You're not going to find someone in 2 weeks anyway. I've had enough of this shit. So fast forward a few hours. God, what was the next one? Oh yeah, homeless lady has been missing for a few days in the woods down on Orange Avenue. I end up, being the lead medic, so I go find what's left of her hanging from, bones in a seat, and that's number two. Number three, I don't know if you heard about this fire, was the one we had in, I think it was 50's First Jew. Either a suicide attempt or arson attempt, but young man inside a home comes out fully engulfed in fire. They put him out in the backyard. We're on the way to the fire, hear that medic screaming for help, so we end up detouring some on the rescue. And we go, I ride in with him. Crazy call, like the perfect. I've never seen a more powerful example of when the soul didn't know that the body was already dead. This guy, 3rd-degree burns, like no nose, tongue gone, fingers gone. I mean, just burnt to a crisp and talking like I'm talking to you now. It was fucking complete mindfuck. But that was number three. 3 fatalities. And then also in that same medic had a car drive into a bus stop outside 51 and a woman got creamed underneath. She survived, but
I remember.
so
I remember
that was my last shift. And it wasn't because of that, but not a single person came in any of those, and again, I was gone after that, but we would have calls like them sometimes, and never once in the 5 years I was there even had anyone of any CISD, mental health, nothing reach out. And I only realize that now, years later, reflecting back. But all, including that last day, and Chris, I mean, the medic that was, the one I responded with, like he was there for shifts after. And I don't think they got anyone at all. So the 3 horrific deaths in, separate deaths in one shift, and that doesn't flag that you probably should send one, just to make sure the crew's okay. That I think is a failure.
Yeah, that person you absorbed. And I remember, it's funny, like I remember, kind of when you left, and I never associated it with any, because we didn't work together really much on the same crews or shifts. And I remember like hearing that like you left to go to Reedy Creek, and I thought, oh man, that sucks. I liked that guy. Kind of like I remember kind of like, we lost a good one. Damn it. But and I also remember thinking if I ever bumped you at training, I was going to sing you the Mickey Mouse song just to mess with you. But at the same time, like I remember that shift. It's so funny as you explain this. I wasn't on those calls, right? We've all had very familiar and similar experiences. And one thing I try to avoid when I'm talking to anybody that's been there is it's very easy with you and I. You're for some reason my brain wants to like now almost like trauma equal or one up, right? And it's just like, why? Stop. You know what I mean? Like that's not like what you just shared is catastrophic. Like that's terrible. And we've been there. I mean, but I will say this. I remember that shift, and as you're explaining those calls, some pieces and parts of like listening to them or hearing about them came back, and I can remember where I was in the station or listening to a portable on that call and being like, and it's just like it just instantly you're back there. And a lot of times, James, I don't want to go back and talk about certain calls or certain things because it makes it really real. I don't know if that's the same for you. Like if it just really kind of some of that trauma just became almost new. I don't know, but I'll say this. My first experience with the county of them putting together I shouldn't say the first experience of them putting together a CSIM team or CSID, whatever you call, but it's the first one and it's the only one in my whole career. It was early on-ish that actually made a difference. I was like, wow, because I'd already kind of had a bad attitude about it. So it couldn't have been the first one I'd been to. Obviously I'd been to the one in Osceola County where she was not prepared for what she was about to hear and did not know how to address us, handle it, process it, pull it out. Had nothing to say after the fact other than just like it destroyed her a bit. I had to have been to a couple in the county prior to this one I'm thinking of. I just can't recall them because I knew I had a kind of a bad attitude about them. I remember thinking like, these are worthless. You know what I mean? Like I remember leaving most of them sometimes feeling worse than I did, before being sent to them. And there was one at when I was at 52 and I was a firefighter. Brian Onkus was the medic, I think. Terry Hawkins was there a lot then too. Can't remember the entire crew, but uh, a crotch rocket was going down Sand Lake Road doing like 140, 150 miles an hour, like just getting it. And sometimes I sound like a pansy when friends are like, "Oh, you wouldn't understand unless you've gone that fast. It's insane. Everyone judges it." And I'm thinking, I don't even bother telling them because I don't want to be that guy. And I'm like, yeah, but there's other people. It's not just about you, But this particular call, this lady was driving a minivan and she was coming out of kind of like those offices where the satellite TV dishes were, the Golf Channel and all that, like just west of Tangelo Park. So not very far from the station. And she had her and her friend in the front seat and two children, like in car seats. I think one in a car seat, maybe one not, in the back of the van. And the kids were fighting and slapping each other and screaming and crying. And one was getting out of its seatbelt. And from what I understand, the mom had looked and to her left and the road was clear. And the kids were being jerks and messing around. And the one kid was like, and she was like, fine, give me your seatbelt. And like was trying to undo it or whatever. She had just looked, it was clear, and like for a long ways. And so as she was pulling out and kind of like, did the glance again, like, yeah, it was clear. It's still clear. It was clear forever. She was pulling out that bike that was doing like 150-ish, wouldn't even have been a dot when she looked 3 or 4 seconds earlier, was there. And it T-boned the van behind the B post, and came like pretty much all the way through the van. It decapitated the rider. The child that was in the car seat was pretty much burnt and ground up by the chain because the throttle was stuck. And so the bike was pretty much just sitting there running wide open throttle on that toddler. And the other kid, if I can't recall, it was just really heavily trauma. And the two moms in the front seat were basically not a scratch. And while we're working that call, the mom, apparently we found out later she had been the driver on an accident about a year prior where her husband perished.
Oh, my goodness.
And she walked out in traffic on Sand Lake Road in front of a truck on the call, so she was an auto-ped because she had decided to kill herself on that call, basically in front of us as we're trying to work these kids. And so of course, we're working her, and it was severe. It was a heavy call. And okay, so you call over, whatever, right? You clean up, do all the stuff. I remember there was like a rural metro medic on that call that had like just been signed off, and you know how hard it is to get your patch. I respect anyone who does that. Had just been signed off, and I guess she quit after that day. Just decided like, no, I'm not, this is not for me. And that's sad. I don't laugh at that. I shouldn't laugh at the counselor, the first one. I don't know why I do. I guess I'm just, I'm not a great person sometimes, but anyway, I won't laugh at that medic who quit. That's just terrible. You work that hard, but we went to a CSIM, and 10, I remember that was a thing. Engine and Rescue 10 showed up from Orlando on that call because it was kind of one of those like it was on the line. We shared an area with them pretty closely. We got there way first, because we were right down the street. 10 showed up on the call, and we put them to work on, hey, do this, help us out. And we always got along with them very well. And the call ran as smoothly as a call like that can go. But so, and it's funny now that I talk through this, and I remember 10 because it was the first CSM I ever been to that was good and it mattered, and it happened at Orlando 10. So Orlando ran it. Their team ran it, and they invited 52's crew and rural metro crews to it. So, hats off to them for that. And so I don't know if the county would have run one. I know we went to Station 10 and we were out of service. The county, did grant us that. Okay, yeah, you're out of service. Get cleaned up and go over to 10 for that this meeting. And the counselor sat down and she said, I did like 21 years in Chicago EMS. I was a paramedic, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, ultimately back injuries, picking up heavy people, you know what I mean, slipping and all the stuff we slip in, blah, 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 aggravating back injuries, the knee injuries. She's like, ultimately, I had to tap. She was like, physically, my body couldn't do it anymore. She was like, and mentally and emotionally, spiritually, whatever. She's like, I was a hollow person. I was done. She's like, I was ready to end my life. She was like, and all the counseling and all the meetings were worthless. She was like, because I couldn't connect with anyone. No one I felt like had been there, had walked that, had understood that. She's like, so my thought was to give back. I went to, she's like, I just was mad. I felt like the whole process was flawed. And everyone that talked to me, I just sat there the whole time like, you don't get it. And so she had my attention right out of the gate because I'm like, huh, okay. She served in Chicago. I'm like, she has definitely played. You know, I hate, some of the words we use seem so wrong sometimes, even as they come out of your mouth. It's like playing should be a happy thing, but she had definitely done it and seen it. She had recognized that her injuries and whatever else, and then she was like, and it also had said that most CSIM and CSIDs to her had been a joke. And I'm like, okay, I am no longer tuning this person out. I'm not going to sit here and do my polite presence. I want to hear what she has to say. And I don't recall exactly everything she said, but I know that she broke it down. I just felt understood. I felt like there was a colleague to share with, somebody that had rated opening up to, and that had been there and understood. And so that CSIM, I really came out of it feeling like, huh. I mean, it's still a really heavy call. And I remember Ben Seacrest was with me on that call, and he told me, and the thing is, I always thought back then too, it was kind of like you're being a wimp to be bothered. Like, you know what I mean? Like you're supposed to just be like the senior guy puts his, hey, you good? Yeah, I'm good. Go home. Don't kick the dog. Don't hurt anyone. Don't shoot yourself. Drink a bunch of whiskey and suck it up. Shelf it. It's your job. Do your job. You're fine. And honestly, I told you earlier, I really kind of thought I was for this whole stretch from the Osceola County, from the tornadoes, through that call, through a bunch of other heavy calls. I really kind of thought that I was exempt from this. I'm like, the things were hard, but I didn't have nightmares. I didn't have I just kind of, they were sad. They were hard. They made me feel confused inside, geez, not really knowing how to process it. And so eventually I just kind of pushed it back. And at the time, I think I thought, okay, I've forgotten that and I'm good, and, so yeah, I remember that one. Actually, I felt better. And I also felt like, I felt like I didn't really understand people that had the big breakdown and whatnot. I just thought yeah, I don't know, man. I didn't want to judge them too hard, but I thought maybe I'm exempt from that. Maybe I'm just perfect for this job, and I had a little bit of pride about it. Yeah, yeah, whatever, man, I'm good, so anyway, I've been talking enough. Sorry.
No, but this is exactly it. And it goes back to what we were talking about as far as, taking that top 10% and really wanting to do the job, because these calls, I mean, these were just two shifts of a, 14, or in your case, a lot longer year career. And so, the creating the environment for us to perform, like I said, and a healthy environment and all that stuff, but also the competition, so that when you get that top tier and you start talking about this at the front door and really kind of forging mental resilience by helping people process these traumas, because it's not normal to see this horrible shit. That is an incredibly important part of the process and the conversation. But going back to what we were talking about, now you go get a bunch of 18-year-olds and you train them, you give them the pieces of paper that you need to be a firefighter, and then you expose them to this on the second shift. That is a huge, it's just irresponsible. It's a disservice to the people that have towed the line versus, having this competitive process. I would argue even, realistically, we probably shouldn't be firefighters to about 21 at least anyway. And then, being enveloped in these tools. So these incredible men and women that put this uniform on can deal with this horrible shit and these horrendous losses that we witness. We hear the screams of the loved ones. That stuff has to go somewhere. You know what I mean? And being buried down is the worst thing that we can do. But as we both know from our earlier careers, that was what everyone did, and thank God you and I are here to talk about it, but we've got many friends that aren't.
It's a fact. It's funny you mentioned the age. I've thought often about soldiers and others. The 22 a day blows my mind. With veterans, it's ridiculous. That's over 8,000 a year. And it breaks my heart. I just but that age is important. 18-year-old. I'm not trying to bag on anyone's age. There's some very mature 18-year-olds out there, but still, your cerebral cortex and all that things aren't processed enough. They're not fully developed enough, you know what I mean, to be making these life and death decisions, to feel like at the end of it, oh man, if I would have gone this way a little more instead of this way a little more, would that 2-year-old still be alive? Would that, you know what I mean? And the blame on yourself. And then, it's just natural family reaction to almost pound the chest on a responder and be like, why? Or like, no, they're not dead. And that just goes into you like, yeah, I guess I screwed up. It's my job to make people not dead. And, yeah, so I guess it's on me,
Yeah. I've said this actually when I reflect back now, because I went to medic school when I was at the county. It was kind of funny, actually, screaming for medics, absolutely screaming for medics. I put myself through school. They wouldn't even give me tuition reimbursement. So it was, but once I had my patch, they were like, all right, now you're mandatory for
Yeah.
the rest of your time here. But when I reflect back on fire training, not so much EMT, but certainly paramedic, where you're really, really the lead in these calls, we do a horrible job at educating people that we are going to do our damnedest to save this person, but especially on the EMS side, if you're doing a code, you're doing a mega code or whatever the training is, that you should then end up with asystole and then turn to you and say, good job, you did everything right. You just couldn't save this.
Oh my God. How amazing would that be? I've done a lot of things in life. I've been blessed, but in fishing, they call that managing expectations. You know what I mean? If you're taking people fishing for the day on a charter boat and like the fishing's been shit, and every client expects this, you have to start out with the gate of like, we're going to swing for the fences. We're going to give it hell. We're going to do everything we can. But you have to then manage the expectation on the day that things have been really slow lately. And how amazing would that be? Because like you said, most training, whatever else, like they end it with a code save. They end it with success. And you're kind of conditioned to like, yep, I got this. I understand these things. I know what to do next. I know how to paint by numbers and run these calls. And you think like, okay, I got it. When you're not ready for the way it turns out a lot of the times.
No. And like I said, I was a black flag. I look back and I trained diligently and I did lots of extra classes and, took the job very seriously and kept in shape and, did all the things, but I just would get the GI bleeds, the brain bleeds, the triple A's. I mean, you just name it. I had the ones that I had. This one poor guy was a quadriplegic and, literally died in front of us, but you couldn't even compress his chest because it was like the quarter panel of a car. So you couldn't even do that's what I got over and over and over again. So sometimes and
nobody had warned you, James, this might happen.
Yeah,
and so you're feeling like,
time.
what am I doing wrong?
Exactly.
You're feeling like, what am I doing wrong in that moment? When in reality, nothing. You weren't doing anything wrong.
No. And that's just it. And then you look back and go, okay, well, everything went right. We just didn't save the person. And it's the same on a fire scene. Actually, there's the story in my second book, my most recent book, because, and I want to make this into a show. But what happens on television? The firefighter goes in and he gets the kid and he comes out and then the kid starts coughing. And then, the next shift he comes with a cake to the station. And even in someone pointed out recently, even the EMS and fire docuseries, usually they'll highlight these saves, but that's not what we know. And even at Reedy Creek, which has the highest code save rate, I think, in America, because there's just so many witness arrests and AEDs everywhere. Even there, 5 years of just death. So, some of us are just going to be that shit magnet. It is what it is. But if you're not including that in your training, like, hey, the probability of a code save is, 5%, 10%, whatever it is these days, there's a 90+% chance this person won't make it. So let's weave that into the training. That is not a failure that you didn't get ROSC. You did everything exactly as you should have done. You gave that person every chance to come back from this, but their heart was just too diseased, or, the trauma was just too much. And I think that would really, really help with that moral injury of, why didn't I save that person? I must have failed.
Yeah. I got a few thoughts, if you don't mind.
Please.
And it's very on point with what we're, everything we're saying. I mean, it's, I've thought a lot of times, like, why do police, fire, military, EMS, when this young person, if you go all the way back to the beginning of your journey, of mine, of anyone's, why do they say, this is what I want to do, and why do they sign their name? Why do they sign up? And I can only speak for me, right? But I think, and I hope that there's some similarities, you know what I mean? Like or maybe some connection, maybe not, I don't know. But for me, I wanted to do something bigger than myself. I wanted to serve a cause that I just felt was this good thing, this, like, noble cause. It felt like, okay, what am I going to do with my life? You know what I mean? Like, I don't really want to go to school long enough to be a lawyer or a doctor and make gobs of cash, and I'm fine with working hard and living simple and having a little bit of fun. And, I don't necessarily want to be like this wealthy, powerful person. I felt this, like, I want to serve, I want to help. And, I don't know if that's true for others, as to why they got in. And we've talked a little bit about, like, my faith when I was younger, and how it was real to me as it had been taught, and kind of, that's the way it's going to be. But then it became real to me, and it became something that was important to me as a young person. And I did carry that into the fire service. I remember bringing my Bible when I was at Station 50, and I was a little bit quiet about it. I was the rookie and whatnot, you know what I mean? But, like, I did carry that in as something that was very important to me. And it did, I think, looking back, help me. It was some heavy calls at 50, 50, 51, all the houses, 30, 42, the ones where it's just like every day you're going to be playing in it. And I do think that was something that really, leaning into my faith, not having the county to teach me everything you just said, but having that faith in that book that I read that basically said, hey, there's a time to live, there's a time to die. God decides, not you. You just do the best you can. And if you give me everything you've got, then well done, my humble servant. You know what I mean? Like, I'm proud of you. And I think I carried a lot of that definitely, when I say, like, oh, I just didn't think it affected me when I was new. I think maybe, and I'm not trying to put this like, oh, this is the answer, this is the way. But for me, I think that was sort of my own CSIMs to an extent. But somewhere in the middle of my career, and this is where I have to, I apologize. This is what I felt led to call you. I don't know how or when or where, but somewhere I just kind of decided, I'm kind of tired of, I never have been a big church guy. I just have been like read it for myself and have a faith and a relationship with God guy. But at some point I decided, I don't know, man. You know what I mean? Like, I took such small steps away from that over a period of time that they became almost, I think to myself, unrecognizable. I didn't really realize that I was deciding that clearly of a decision. It didn't feel like that clear cut of decision. Like, I don't want anything to do with that anymore. It's something I had been for a big portion of my life, but it was such a gradual shift and pull that I just slowly became less and less interested, less and less thinking, reading, praying, or anything about that. And more like, I don't really care. And I don't know, somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I lost what was, important to me, what mattered to me. And I think, I know that I lost a bit of a compass there, a moral compass, if you will. And I kind of just started doing whatever I thought would make me feel good. You know what I mean? Like this trauma, these things, this stuff, and I started looking for value in things that I knew better, but I had taken a big shift from looking that direction to Maybe if I'm just a really, really badass firefighter or engineer or lieutenant as I move up, maybe if I'm one of the best in the business, like a Carl Long, or you know what I mean, then like people will look at me with this like, man, he knows what he's doing. Like I trust that guy. He's squared away. Then I'll derive value from that, and I'll derive a self-worth from that. And so I placed way more emphasis on the career, on being I don't want to say perfect, but like, yeah, if I can be that good, then I'll feel good, you know? And of course, you know, I'm not going to sit here and like pick on all the other vices because we're not in a confessional, and I don't think you want to go get your white collar. But a lot of the vices that you know you see people in this profession fall into, and I kind of think like this might happen with other police or military, that they started as this like relatively good person. They think they looked at themselves in the mirror and they were pretty okay with who they saw. They were like, I'm not a bad person, you know, like I'm pretty all right guy or gal, and I'm here to help people and I'm here to do good things. And whether the trauma and the drama and the blood and the guts and the mud and all the stuff, I don't really know. You know way more about that. But somewhere along the line, I think it's easy to lose yourself. You know, easy to whatever compass, whatever thing you hung to that you started with, it's easy to definitely steer from that. And I know I did. And at that point, it's like, you know, now I'm in real trouble because everything I'm basing my self-worth on, my how I view myself in the mirror, is so fragile, right? Because we're human. And now I'm going to go to work and mess up. I'm going to go to work and not run a call as perfectly as I wish I would have. I'm going to start getting more and more critical of myself. Like, damn it, Rob, like that, come on, do better, you know, and just get super critical inside. And I'm going to be more and more afraid to open up because I don't have that security. I don't want to look weak. So I'm just going to keep more and more of it in and smile until I'm good, man. Yeah, leave me alone. I got it. And, you know, it's that it starts to become this really hollow tower with really bad foundation and cracking rock. And everything you're basing I was basing my self-worth on, like whether it be like I said, confessional level vices or the job and how I view myself and performance, you're going to fail. You know, you're going to fail because you're human. You're going to mess up. You're going to get things wrong from time to time. And your sense of worth. And so I know with me personally, I just chased it harder, doubled down. You know what I mean? Like, you know, athletically and everything else in my life, if you're messing up, if you're not getting it right, work harder, train harder, dig in. You know what I mean? After a loss in hockey, be at the rink the next morning. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you know, like work harder, put in more effort. But at that time throughout the last, I'd say, I don't know, third or so of my career, I had lost who I knew myself to be. I was looking in every wrong spot for value. I was becoming someone at first in the mirror I didn't really recognize. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like you kind of like, you knew deep down that you didn't approve of a lot of the way you were being, the way you were treating other people. You knew you were better than how you were being, but it was such this like far, far, far off thought that you're like, yeah, I don't know. And the road back felt like so cloudy and impossible that you're like, yeah, whatever, man. Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. You know, you tell yourself that lie and you just keep walking down this dangerous path. And then every mistake makes you feel more worthless. And, oh, I got to double down. I got to work harder. I can't make mistakes. I've got to be the best lieutenant, you know, and I'm not as smart as, you know, like I am who I am. I don't think I was terrible, but you know, like when you place this value and you keep upping it, like I got to do better, you know, and you're starting to place an expectation that you can't reach. You know what I mean? Of like this almost perfect leader, this perfect person. And then the more mistakes you make, the worse you view yourself. And I know with me personally, it went from like not recognizing who I saw in the mirror to once I'd really made some big mistakes in my life to despising the person I saw in the mirror, to like looking at that person and be like, oh God, you're not a good guy. You know what I mean? And then you feel that in your gut and you're like, to me, that's the beginning stages of like the really scary scary part of depression and suicidal thoughts, because you don't like you. You know, you're not proud of you. And you started this job to be this like helper of others and to be this good person and to do this noble thing. And you were willing to die to do it. You were willing to prove, you were willing to give your life for a noble cause. You already made the decision. If that house is rolling and James is in there and he calls a mayday, I'm going. You know what I mean? I don't care if a battalion chief, I don't care if there's a cop, like, you're going to have to shoot me. I'm going, you know, and if I don't come out, you know, then I don't come out. But if he's in there, you know what I mean? I had that mentality when I was in the right places in my life, right? So to me, you've already accepted this. And whether a soldier or a police officer accepts like I might die, but it's ultra noble and it's a good thing. And if it comes to that, it comes to that. I'm not going to back down in that moment. You know, you've already decided. And now way later in your career, you've got these really bad self-worth. You're disgusted with yourself. You see where I'm going. It's like you've already decided for a noble cause. If I die, obviously non-suicide, that if I die, I die, but I'm going to do it doing the right things. And now on this end, you see yourself as someone who does the wrong things, a bad person. And you're just, and by the way, those are lies. You know that, I know that, but they feel real. They feel really, really, really real. And so it's like, you just feel like, okay, I sort of already accepted I might die. Now all I do is seem to hurt those I care about, family members, loved ones. I seem to not, I'm not being a great officer. And by the way, I do want to apologize. I don't think I was like terrible, but I do want to apologize to an extent to some that maybe, I worked with that, like, there was times I wasn't in it. I was struggling, I was faking it, and I wasn't in it. And I could have been a phenomenally better friend, leader, the whole 9 yards. And, but anyway, so just kind of, and I don't want to go on forever, but I think kind of mixing in with that too, there's a thought of like, I've seen so much, as you touched on, death, trauma, so much blood, so much, and you see so much loss and you hear so much wailing and screaming of family members that to me, I started to feel like, okay, wait a minute. Everybody walks this like loss. I'm not exempt. I'm no different. Everyone I love is going to die and possibly right in front of me. Everything I care about is going to go away, and what's the point of life? You know what I mean? When I was in that dark, depressive kind of mode, you're like, nothing means anything, and that further became a justification for irresponsible bad behavior. Because I'm like, eat, drink, and be merry. Tomorrow you die. Like, it's just like, it doesn't matter. Nothing matters. And you've lost that purpose, that cause, that why. Like, you don't have a why for why you're here. You don't have a purpose. To me, I allowed it to an extent, I think. I'm not trying to be too hard on myself, but to my purpose to become corrupted, and looking back, and I'm almost done with my
no, there's no rush. No rush.
My hijack of the thread here, but it was after I retired, James. And I really still kind of thought, I knew I was struggling at the time for that last part of my career. And after retiring, I knew, and I always thought I would do more than 25. I thought I would do that and the drop and whatever else. And I got near the end and I was really struggling mentally, psychologically, spiritually, the whole 9 yards. And I started feeling like, man, I'd really rather eat a bullet than go back to work. Like I didn't want to go. And I was struggling. I was able to share some of that with my wife. She's been so patient and so loving. She truly has been a first responder without being one. I don't say it lately, I think she saved my life. But because she's always been a very strong believer, but she never pulled her pride. Because I'm the type, if I get pushed or pulled too hard towards something, it's not happening. You know what I mean? If you push me too hard to something, I'm not ready to hear when I'm like, it's almost like Greg Pine's telling you that British firefighters don't go inside. You're like, yep, yeah, okay, I'm done listening. Like it's offensive, And so she was so patient and so wonderful. And she just, I think, never gave up on me, on praying for me, on being patient, on not pushing me. But I was able to share there towards the end of my career how bad I was struggling. And I wasn't able to articulate it as clearly as I see it now. But I was able to just tell her, like, man, I'm done. Like, I I don't want to go play pretend anymore. Like I used to feel this, and now I feel like I'm putting the hat on to just go do my job. And I've always said, like, lead, follower, get out of the way. You know what I mean? Be about it or move. And I did that on the truck. I did that in special ops with on the Orlando Eye, and there came a time when I left that, and towards the end of my career, I transferred out of that environment because I really felt like I was starting to grasp at it, and I wasn't eating it, with love and joy as much as I used to. And I started to feel like that even though maybe no one was noticing, I knew that I wasn't the best lieutenant I could be on that truck. And there was other guys that were hungry. Oh, they were hungry. They were as hungry as I used to be. And they wanted it so bad. And I had to look at my crew. And that's one thing I can say I'm kind of proud of and feel like I can't be a hypocrite. I've always said, be about it or move. Be all in or get out of the way. Stop occupying the spot. And as that started to become real to me, I'm like, I got to get out of this environment and downgrade a bit because there's people that are hungrier that quite simply will do a better job than I'm doing right now. Like I said, I don't think I was doing a terrible one, but like Donnie Krantz came into 54 truck eventually. He was who I tried to peg for it when I was first leaving, and it didn't quite work out that way. I think he's there now. Man, what a heavy hitter. What a guy that just brings the A game, And when I started to feel that A game become an A- or a B+ just because it's the best I could do at that time, you can start to say to yourself, well, I'm doing my best. Yeah, but to wrap it all up, it was after I retired and I was struggling. I just expected to feel better the second I came home. You asked me in passing the other day, how'd you feel, when you came home? And I said, like, almost like a man let out of prison. Like, wow, like I don't have to hear the tones anymore. I don't have to go to multi-company. I don't have to have the fear of looking stupid in front of peers. I mean, that alone, I think, kills a lot of us. It's crazy. It's not okay to be wrong, ever. And it's like, come on, we're human. I get that in our profession, we should be A game, but there has to be a balance. You know what I mean? And a lot of times I think that balance gets lost. And if you're wrong once or look off once at training, then everybody just kind of turns their head and glares at you like, wow, you're an idiot. And you've worked your whole career to not be an idiot. And now you feel like, wow, I'm worthless. You know what I mean? Like that one mistake, And it was after I retired, Walt Lewis with Orlando, I had known him from hockey, called me up and said, Tom Hill, Bull needs help. And we don't know anyone else who knows anything about a boat. And you've kind of put yours back together and that's kind of your thing. Can you help? And I have a high respect for Walt. And I have a high respect for Bull. What Bull did for others can never be understated, ever. And by the way, he'd been my senior when I was at 50. They kind of put you with a senior fireman to learn. And I'd been in a couple fires with Bull. We'd pull the victim out that didn't make it. I'd worked with Tom, and I didn't realize things had gotten pretty rough for him. And when Walt asked me to help, there was a clear, there's no way one I could say no to helping Tom. I just retired. But was I going to be like, no, I'm busy. Like, no. I agreed because it was just the right thing to do, but it became probably the closest I've ever come, James. And this is hard for me to admit. It's just bearing my soul and just the hopes it helps other people somewhere. Here I was in this, like, not liking myself, disgusted with who I had become, trying to find value and purpose. Now the job's gone. And as much as I thought that would make it better, now I'm not even showing up to work, to answer a tone or to go make a difference or to try to lead people or teach people or train people how to search. I wasn't doing anything that felt like cause, like a purpose. And mix that in with then I felt, okay, yeah, sure, this is going to feel great. Let's go help Tom. Tom's real. He'll tell you exactly how it is. And Tom took me aside a couple times to let me know exactly how it was. And a few times, kind of through the process, him and I had to have a few back and forth conversations, but it became this confusing time. I am helping someone that should feel good. And I didn't like who I was, and it just got super confusing. And it was a frustrating process. Tom was going through a lot of things emotionally, psychologically, mentally. He was dealing with a lot of trauma because he's soaked up more than he ever should have soaked up. And he was going through a lot of trauma. and trying to help him occasionally had some of this and some challenges. And I'm a hardhead too, so I'm not saying that it was one-sided. Being involved in that should have been this like ultra great feel good project. And there was a night early on that I hit the lowest I've ever hit. And I felt myself really wanting just to exit right there, just to end it. I mean, wanting. And and the worst part was it didn't really scare me. And I think I had been fighting it off for so long. And I had those like, almost like I tried to stay, oh, you got to look tough. You got to look strong. You can't voice any of this stuff throughout my career. I think I'd been fighting it for a while to the point where, but I just like, no, nah, you're not thinking that. You're not feeling that. Shut up. Stop. I think I'd been fighting it off long enough that particular evening, it hit like a ton of bricks, and it got scary. And I, I've talked about my faith and spirituality, and I called out. I feel like I was being attacked by the dark, if you will, like they just had me. And I called out to my wife. We'd had a fight that night, and I felt like it, deep down, like it was all my fault. And then I was this big jerk that that just continually hurts people that I love, And I called out to her because like we live on a boat. I'm in the wheelhouse right now. I was like standing like 5 feet over there, and she was in the room behind us. And I just called out to her, and I just said like, I need help, because I was eyeballing my pistol sitting on the counter. I'm like, I need help, and she came in, and she just hugged me and held me. And she started denouncing the enemy. She started, just praying with me, and she started holding me and praying with me. And I sobbed like a baby. And, she just kept praying with me. And I talked to Bull about that. He told some others, which kind of pissed me off because I wasn't really ready to share it. And I remember telling Tom, like, Tom, just because I tell you something doesn't mean like, it can end up on Gehring's podcast, which I don't think he did. But he told some other people. And, I don't know, it scared me. It scared me. It wasn't just that I was close. It was that I was okay with it. I didn't care, and she prayed with me. She held me. We just talked, and it was a lot of tears that night, and a lot of just like, I was able after that for the first time to get some of this out. Like, I feel like such a loser. I feel like such an asshole. And here's why, and just talk it through. And it feels so real to you, but as you start talking it through, even your mind, you're thinking, wait, why are you beating yourself up? Why do you feel like such an asshole for this? This and this, I kind of understand. But like this one, wait a minute, you're not being fair to yourself, And of course, she was telling me that, and she's very good. When someone's hurting, the last thing they want to hear is, oh, stop it. You're wrong. Even if you're wrong, if you were telling me right now, like, Rob, I'm really hurting with this, the last thing you'd want to hear is like, James, you're just being crazy. Even if you're wrong, the last thing you need to hear like, hey man, that sucks. That's tough. You need to hear a validation because it's real. And when someone just like blows it off, even if they mean well, I'm like, oh, stop it. You're wrong. It just feels like they don't get it, and they don't connect with you at all. She never went there with me on that. But the last kind of thing with this is that I have slowly, it didn't happen that week. It happened slowly. I think she just never stopped praying for me. But I finally decided, I told her, I said, look, I'm not about going to church on Sundays, but I'll spend some time in the Word with you on Sunday. A little, you and me, and reading a little bit and thinking about it. And there's this show called The Chosen. It's well produced, and it's really just about the life of Christ. And I'll watch some of that with you. And and it's gotten to the point now where I just, like I said, I don't want to come off sounding like, I don't want to drive people away. But the fact of the matter is, God has healed me. And it's going to be an ongoing process. I'm always going to be a work in progress. I'm always going to be flawed. I'm always going to make mistakes. But we spend time in the Bible every morning. I don't dread it. Like a 5-year-old getting drugged to church. I have a lot to do on this boat. I have a lot to do every day. But the time spent there, you go, wow. Like I look at a lot of the stuff in the Bible, and I'm like, this guy was a complete screw up. You know what I mean? Like this guy, like murdered his brother to sleep with his brother's wife, or you know what I mean? Like, you look at some of this stuff and you're like, some of these people were like not good people, but they got real with God and they got on their face and they're like, man, or God found them and convicted them and said, hey, look, I've got a plan for you. Stop it. Follow me, walk with me. And like, and it came back to like that. There's a plan, there's a purpose, there's a why, you know? I feel like that my life isn't over at all. Like, it's just starting. I have a chance now to get this boat together. There's a lot of missionary services that take things down island, and the most of their airplanes. But sometimes there's too much cargo, too heavy to carry on an airplane. Why can't I occasionally load up the boat and go down island to do something for others? To do something for an orphanage or something down there that'll just feel like it's what you're supposed to be doing. A why. And I didn't mean to hijack anything. That was when I started feeling this a couple weeks back or whenever, but when I reached out to you, I felt like God was saying like, hey, you've had quite a trip. You've had this journey and you've gone from like here to even lower and lower yet. And I've brought you back out of it and here we are. I would like for you to share that. And it terrified me. So I'm like, man, I don't want to tell everybody this. You know what I mean? Like, this is, but when I first talked to you, I thought, well, there's only one person I know. And he's phenomenal at this. And I can't tell you the difference I feel you're making in people's lives. Like, there's only one person I know that has this platform. And I'll reach out to him. And if he's like, yeah, cool story, but Rob, you're kind of a quack and I want to talk to you. I'm like, okay, cool.
That's what I said. I don't know why you showed up.
Yeah, right. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm off the hook. I don't have to do this, but you took me up on it and thank you. And yeah, that's really it. I promise I'm done with my Irish Springboks,
No, but this is why you're here though. This is the point, like I've always said, I'm only here just to kind of begin conversations to go a little bit back and forth. But I mean, the whole point is for the people that come on to tell their story. Couple of things I want to go back because I mean it's such a powerful testimony, and thank you for having the courage because as everyone that's worked in Orange County knows, you were this revered special ops, hockey playing.
I hope
so. We drank a lot of whiskey at many Irish band like Flogging Molly concerts. So that's who a lot of people know. And these are
those. Those were fun.
They were fun. I think the lead singer is not doing well now, so I don't know if we're going to see any more of those, sadly. But
I had heard that, and then I heard he was doing better and coming back. So
good. All right.
If they do another concert at House of Blues, I'll meet you there.
That sounds good. So going back to the darkest point, though, because this is something, I mean, I literally, as we sit here now, there's 1,200 episodes of this podcast gone out. And so as I started progressing through early on, there were a couple of common denominators when it came to people getting the lowest point that you just talked about. One was obviously wanting the suffering to end, the pain to end, or wanting to feel something, whatever it is. And that, we're all pretty aware of. But the other thing that really surprised me that you just don't hear discussed normally, certainly not back then, was this feeling of burdensome. That when there was this perfect storm of all the contributing factors, the trauma that we see, the sleep deprivation, the organizational betrayal, all the things, the side effects of alcohol, just everything compounding, that the person's reality has actually been shifted. And it can be labeled as the devil whispering or, whatever, the neuroscience, whatever we want to look at it as, to where that person believes that they are a burden to the ones that they love. And if I just remove myself, everyone will be happier. And it really knocks against what we were told, when we were younger. Suicide is selfish, it's cowardly. How could you think of your family? And you actually listen to these people that were there either right before they took their own life, or several have come on the show. They went through the attempt and they just survived. That there was that absolute belief, which in theory makes a lot of people that we've lost at that moment, it was courageous and selfless in a completely distorted mind. But as you said, we've already said that we would die for a complete stranger. If you truly believe that your child, your spouse will be better off, then you're like, all right, well, then I'll make the sacrifice. So it's terrifying because to a healthy mind, obviously that makes no sense. But the number of people that I hear, that is their absolute reality. They believe it to the core that this is the solution. I am the problem. If I'm gone, everyone else is happier. Did it get to that point in your mind?
I think to an extent. I don't know. Like I said, I try to be very careful because I don't ever want to, sort of trauma compete. And I just have so much respect for anyone who's been there, and my heart goes out to those that did it. It breaks for them. And anyone who got close, or I don't know, as far as a comparison, but I know that with me, I hated who I felt that I was. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't like that person. I despised that person. And I think I also felt like I didn't deserve anything good. That was another big thing. Like I just felt like I was just such this bad person. The good things actually kind of hurt a little bit. You know what I mean? It was like I just felt like I didn't deserve anything good, and I didn't deserve to feel joy. I didn't deserve, and so like I was wanting to run from things that were good for me, because like, nah, you're a total jerk, dude. Like, you're an ass, and you don't deserve that. And then also, yes, I think mixed in with like wanting to be at the initial of the career when you're a young person, this helper, this noble cause chasing good thing. And then over here with all this negativity and dark, feeling like, wow, I've completely corrupted my purpose. I'm a bad person. And yeah, you know what I mean? Like, and if I continue, all I'm going to do is continue to hurt those I love. If I stick around, all I'm going to do is continually subject my wife, my friends, my family, people I love. I'm just going to keep destroying them and hurting them. And you're like, how do I not do that? Oh, well, I'm pretty worthless and I don't think I'm capable of getting it right. So, that's where that becomes like if I'm not here, then I can't hurt them.
What about sleep deprivation? This is another, what I call the herd of elephants in the room. The way that we're worked. And I was at Orange County up till 2013, and back then, mandatories were just insane, and I don't believe it's got any better from what I understand. 56-hour work week, no Kelly days as it is. That's the base. What was the prevalence of extra shifts that you were working throughout that, through most of your career, the second half especially?
I mean, when I was on 54 truck and down there on iDrive, and you're going to get mandatory a little bit more. You're going to have to, it's funny when people say like, oh, well, you picked that shift up. No, you only did that to try to avoid, not working on an important event to your family. As you well know, that's like a voluntary and mandatory. And then the most frustrating thing ever, which I'm sure you're aware of, is you end up getting mandatory anyway. And you're like, but the sleep deprivation, especially like before I ended up leaving 54, the truck was first out, which was like the only place in America I'm aware of that a ladder truck ran all the Band-Aid calls. And 6601, the psych unit across the street, and Central Florida Behavioral, and just I drive. It's busy, right? And you didn't get the respect of being like a 50 or a 51 or a 42 or a 30, but meanwhile you were like right here on the calls, and sometimes here. You just weren't running as much fire and whatnot, so that was kind of annoying. But I mean, yeah, it was wearing on me, I think. And once again, you kind of have the mentality back then. I look back as like, you're a fireman, big deal. Like, you don't whine about that. That's like a lifeguard whining about having to get in the pool. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, what kind of wimp would you be to be like, oh, I'm not sleeping? Like you just kind of you wore it as a badge of courage. You looking back, that's not healthy. But at the time, you're like, yeah, I got like 2 hours of sleep last night, sort of, not quite, and then you'd work in overtime, and, it just compounded. So I don't know that I ever really thought about it, but I'm sure that was happening. Now, to be fair, before someone ever calls me out on this later, my last year and a half, 2 years, I think, maybe two and change ish, my memory does get a little foggy on some of that. I did leave the truck. I transferred out east, living in Merritt Island, and it was just time to get out. Like I said, I felt that I wasn't being the best fit for that team, and there was hungrier, newer people that just could serve those guys better. I mean, you talk about, as you know, Ramel Palma and Vladimir and Ben Sechrist. When you got a crew like that, you know what I mean? Like, I was so blessed to work with them for so many years, but when you start realizing that you're not as hungry as you should be. Anyway, and there was some other factors that I don't necessarily really want to go into in regards to 54 that it made it time to look elsewhere. And I ended up at 85 on the east side. And I went from like, I don't know, 14 on a slow day, 12, 14 to 17, 18 calls a shift to like 0 to 3. You know, 85 was definitely not anywhere near the call volume. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is going to be perfect. You know, and everything James talks about, this is going to be so healthy. You know, I'm going to be sleeping at work. You know what I mean? Like, this is like, I'm making a good move for me towards the end of my career. I'm getting closer to home and I'm not going to have all this sleep interruption. But I think I started realizing, I'm like, actually, to be fair, I didn't realize how crappy I was still sleeping there, knowing the tones could drop, right? And I will say this, a solid year and change went by after retirement. My wife and I had flown out to Washington State to spend Christmas with her sister. And we were flying back and we were staying at the hotel at the airport because we had like an early morning flight, you know, all the way across the country in the morning. We're staying at the hotel and at like 1:30 in the morning, the fire alarm goes off, you know, and it's cold outside. It was like brutal cold. There was like ice on the sidewalks and whatnot. And, you know, it jarred me out of my sleep. I'm like, oh, crap. And she's like trying to grab a suitcase and a bag. Whoa, hold on. I'm like, I'm looking out the window. I'm like, if the fire engine pulls up and this thing gets silenced in the first like 20 seconds, you know, it means that it was either a bag of popcorn somewhere or just in a system malfunction. They're going to silence this if there's anything to it, and then they're going to leave. I'm like, we don't need to go outside until like they don't silence it or they start getting on the PA and telling which floors need to evacuate. I'm like, I'm not going outside yet. And so like, you know, 15, 20 seconds later, I don't know, they silence it. 10 minutes later, they get in the rig and leave. I'm like, we're going back to bed. You know, it was a malfunction or a popcorn call. And the next day I was like mad and irritable and cranky and just like being a jerk. You know, here I was like, I'd been retired like a year and change, and I never really felt some big shift towards being like a nicer person. And that next day, here I am being like snippy and short and just being frustrated with things you shouldn't be frustrated with. Almost like looking at you like, why are you wearing those headphones? Those are dumb. You know what I mean? Like, just don't see like where it's like not anything at all. Like, and I'm just annoyed at everything, you know, and I'm just being like, just this total jerk. And it hit me. I'm like, holy cow. I just had one sleep interruption, just one. And I didn't realize how healthy I had been without that. And that one night with that fire alarm in a hotel, the next day just being completely out of sorts and being a jerk again. I'm like, huh, interesting, you know?
Well, this is, I mean, you alluded to Station 85, which I went there a couple of times. I think it was, I don't know if it was OT or just got floated out. That's the funny thing with the county. There were days where I spent 3 hours. I would drive, they say you're going to 20. I'd drive all the way to the north end. They go, actually, you're going to 86. And you go all the way to the east end, like half a tank of gas later, you finally get to the place where you're supposed to be. But this is what I tell people. You are not at home. You are in a place where at any time the tones can go off. And, you know, tragically, as we sit here recording today, there is a sleepy rural community in British Columbia, Canada, that just had a mass shooting in one of their schools. So you never know, you know, in your, you know, the sleepier stations when you're going to get that derailment, that shooting, that plane that comes down. I mean, you just don't know. So yes, don't get me wrong. A night without waking up is better sleep, but you do not get good sleep in a fire station unless you work in a military, you know, establishment where they shut everything down and you know you will not get a call until, you know, 7 a.m. when they start flying again. So this is a big misnomer as well. Is, you know, people say, oh, what about the quiet stations? They barely run anyway. It doesn't matter. You know, firstly, from a psychology point of view, you are not getting that deep restorative sleep that affects everything from mental health to obesity to testosterone depletion to, you know, the ability to get cancer. But also you're away from your family. It doesn't matter if you're running 20 calls or, you know, one call. You are still being told you can't go home. You need to be in this fire station away from your loved ones. So, you know, there's a lot of value to that conversation. Not every security guard is running around chasing burglars all day. You have no problem with him sitting behind the desk reading a book. But why is it that we expect our firefighters to be running 24/7? Otherwise, they don't need the recovery. It's bullshit.
And it's funny, like when I started in the fire service, I didn't join to be lazy. I wanted to be a good firefighter. But it seemed to me there was I don't know when the shift happened, but when I first started, there was like Monday through Saturday almost, maybe at least Monday through Friday. The days are pretty structured. It's boom, boom, boom. If you go to training and all this, right? But all in all, when you came to work on like a Saturday or a Sunday, yes, you had to do the white glove or the field day or whatever people call it on cleaning the station on Saturdays in Orange County. But all in all, the weekends to an extent where after you were done with your chores, it was a little bit more of a relaxed vibe other than calls. Like it was a take it out of gear to an extent, breathe a little bit. There was a little bit more of that like family mentality of like today's, like the station day to, and as the career went, there was never a shift you'd go to work unless it was like Christmas Day almost that the county ever gave you the day off. Saturdays didn't matter. Sundays, you're going to training. You know what I mean? It was just like nonstop all day long. And what would kill me sometimes, what they would do to guys in the truck and squad, especially a squad, I'll give them some love now that I don't work side by side with them and I don't have to, like you go to training for a 6-8 hour drill where you're crawling through concrete, cutting rebar, running torches. It's a drill, but you're right. Like you're being judged on your decision making. You're being judged on your performance. Your reputation is very much on the line. So you can't just be like, it's a drill. Not that any of the guys would anyway. But, you better bring your A game because they're going to throw you a very challenging drill. Now solve it, right? And so you've got to be mentally sharp. You got to just physically sharp and do this drill for 6-8 hours and just be exhausted like you've run a collapse call in a major city. And then go back to the station, clean up, halfway through dinner, run a medical call, and then run calls all night and pretend that you're supposed to be sharp. Like there's a point to where you're just going through the motions.
I'm going to write a piece very soon on performance in the fire service. And the reason I'm doing this is go back 10 years ago when we first started talking about this. And I would argue Chief Dangerfield, when he took his own life and put his suicide note on Facebook, literally about 10 years ago now, was really what seemed to start this whole conversation on the mental health side. But I don't feel like we've really progressed past, we need to smash the stigma, which is such a buzzword. People are starting to say, okay, well, it's not just PTSD, you've got moral injury. And I think that's definitely a great step forward. But if you frame it completely differently and you say, well, how do we forge performance in our firefighters? Now you look at the work week and go, well, that's not the fucking way for a start. Like, if you look at tier 1 operators and all these, well, not even tier 1, like special operators and all these high performers who also have people's lives in their hands, their rest and recovery is incredibly important. And they have experts that they hire to optimize their rest and recovery. When it comes to the mental state, like you said, you've got a collapse, there's a Surfside type incident and there's a child still in some void space in there. And you have to perform at the highest level with the cribbing and getting to this child and the safety and the, managing the air and all these different things. How am I going to have this clarity of mind? Well, I need good sleep. I need to think about meditation. I need to work on anything that's below the surface that's holding me back so I can get into that flow state and operate at that highest level. And then can I do it at an exhausted level? So are we doing drills where I'm testing my fitness and then doing finite tasks? Those things would take us down the same journey that would improve firefighter mental health, that would improve firefighter physical health, which in turn then affects longevity and wellness as well. But we don't talk about that. If you ask, how like next to my station at Reedy Creek, there was a 30-story high rise. So if we had a fire on the top floor, the high rise strip that I put on my skinny 168-pound body was 100 pounds. Then you climb 30 stories. Now you get to start working. You know what I mean? So we've gone so far from performance. And when I talk to these special operations, special forces, war fighters, their psychologists are trying to get them to operate the highest level, this accuracy and optimization under stress. Their strength and conditioning coaches are forging the highest level of strength endurance. You know what I mean? Their nutritionists are trying to get them to optimize at the highest level, understand hydration, what's the the best way for them to be able to fuel their body for some of these missions. Now, look at those same experts once in a blue moon when they bring into a fire department. The conversation is, well, you keep dying, so let's see if we can stop you dying as much. That's it. And there's a fucking Grand Canyon style chasm between not dying and performance. And I think, to get off my soapbox now, we have to shift away from the doom and gloom. Oh, it's so sad we keep dying. Look at the performance level and then go, is our environment set up for performance? And the point being, a 56-hour work week that then dissuades people to even test for us anymore. So now we have all this overtime that you're being forced to tell your child, I can't go home yet again, could not be further from performance. And if we reframe the work week, fitness standards, all these other areas, you'll not only have a fit, optimized fire department, but you watch the cancers, the heart disease, the suicides, the addictions, they will come tumbling down as well.
Wow. Yep. It's 100%. I see that, and it makes perfect sense. But I think, and once again, hats off to you for championing that cause, because it's going to be, I know you're in the fight for the long haul, but it's like anything good, is worth fighting for, and most of it doesn't come easy. But yeah, I know you're getting a lot of pushback, and there's it's going to be a long road on some of that, especially with certain agencies. But yeah, that's the answer, because you know what I mean. It's people don't join. Like I said in the beginning, why do people sign up in the very beginning as an 18, 19, 20, 22-year-old, whatever, or a little later in life? Why? Whenever? Why do they decide? And I think it's because they want to make a difference. They want to serve something greater than themselves, and they have their hearts in the right place, but like you said, you mix in everything we've talked about, and it is just almost amazing the more people don't get completely lost, and I know the health risk, and I'm terrified of that. I have an extensive cancer history in my family. And I think that was another thing too. My wife and I don't have children, and when I got to 25, I was just like, every day in the fire service, I'm just like, what's this? What's that? You know what I mean? Like, and you can start to become a hypochondriac, but also I'm like, man, when's it enough? When I got to when I was approaching the 25, I'm like, you can't spend it when you're dead, and yeah, anyway, no, I 1,000,000% agree with what you're saying.
Well, also, some of the people that you've talked about, so JP, we lost him. Shaky, we lost him.
I love JP. He was one of what a guy.
Carl Andriano, Eric Sienna, Bonner. The list just at Orange County goes on and on and on. And this is the point, is, the way that we're doing it doesn't work. And we know that because we, especially Orange County, we have so many, as I say, the graveyards are full of statistics. You want data, there's your fucking data. There's all these headstones. So we have to look at, changing this. And I think this is a really important part of the conversation. I want to go back to your spiritual journey, though, because this is also, another big part of this. We talk about, the psychological side and the physiological side. But the spiritual side is definitely a big part. If you don't have a reason to be here and you don't believe in that reason, then, that's obviously not going to be a driving force to stay and to thrive. You sit in this room, with your wife, like you said, you talked about now spending time in the Bible. Kind of walk me through from that lowest chasm that you were in, all the different areas that you've pulled from that have helped you start healing and processing the trauma that you went through.
Well, and I'm still obviously healing. There's a lot of times where I just get like, you start thinking about your past, and it's very easy almost to go back there. You're like, man, I wasn't being a good person, or, I made a lot of mistakes and a lot of bad choices. And you can instantly start feeling like, oh, like, man, but I see that as, and I don't judge anyone who sees it different, but I see that as the enemy itself, like as the dark Satan being like, hey, by the way, do you remember you're a screw up? How could you ever expect to like do anything good or help others or do anything, especially for God, with who you are and what you've done? It comes to remind me of my past and comes to say like this, that, and the other. But as I've spent more time in meditation and in the word and just getting, to me, it's just, honestly, in high school, I went to a small Christian high school until it was small. They taught me steps, because like as a young person or as any person that's never been taught, it's like just like in our career, we're supposed to just know things. And you're like, okay, so when was I taught that? But they taught us like, okay, you hear like have a relationship with God. Great. Right. And that's a lot of times where that ends. And you're like, oh, he's up there and I'm here. And like, I don't really know how this works, but they told us, they're like, listen, start your day with feeling the happy face of God, the loving happy face, like you feel towards your child as a father, like you love that child, like you want nothing but good and blessings and good things for that child, right? And I don't have a child, and I'm not saying it's the same thing. I have a dog, but I love that dog, and I love her and I pet on her, and I'm like, I want nothing but her to feel this love, like feel loved and like safe, right? And so they're like, it's no different with your heavenly Father. Like he created you, and he wants you to feel that love, instead of this judgment and everything we were raised with, feel this like, James, I'm proud of you. You know what I mean? Like you're a good man, and I love you. And then, from there, kind of like a quiet place, spend some time meditating, okay, almost talking to in a relationship way, like, what do I need to focus on? Like, where have I messed up lately where I might not even realize it? Was I super rude and mean and nasty to somebody yesterday and I just didn't even pay attention? And do I need to go back to them and be like, hey, James, yesterday when I called you a dumb slob, you know what I mean? Like I was just being a jerk. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know why I said that, blah, blah, blah. Like I was completely out of line. Please, for me, I apologize. Right. That might mean a lot to you. You might have taken that a little bit to heart. Like, wow, that didn't know Rob felt that way about me. And now I've come back to you and I've been like, James, I don't feel that way about you at all. You know what I mean? Like I was just completely being a jerk, and I apologize. Like I was wrong with me, and I want you to forgive me, And so like now you're in a better place. I'm in a better place. I don't have this like guilt of like, man, I'm just a jerk to people, And so like spend that quiet time to reflect on like, for me, it's God, show me where I need to grow and change. What have I, you know what I mean? Like, and humbly, I come before you. Like, I want to know my errors, and in a loving ways, sharing that. And then it's quickly from that to like a note meditation. And these things this whole thing is like 5-10 minutes. It isn't like 2 hours, but a note meditation. My wife had a Bible that's read the Bible from cover to cover in a year. Well, I told you when I went to college, I alluded to, I went to Liberty. And it was a very Baptist, very strict school at the time. It's like not near this so anymore, but they didn't offer minors, and I went there 2 years, but you had to minor in religious studies with any major you had. So I've always felt like, yeah, I technically sort of have a minor in Bible. Like I know it, but there's so much that I read here, never applied it, never thought about it, never meditated on it. Right. And so this Bible she has is just like, it's a couple chapters a day. And it's kind of hard right now because it's in some of the really like Old Testament stuff that you're like, oh my gosh, like it's just an account of everything. And you're like, okay, this is like reading a spreadsheet. But I still pray for wisdom in that. And a lot of that just through even the beginning, I'm like, wow, God used very flawed people. God used people that made mistakes, and they came back and they're like, yeah, I screwed up. And he's like, yeah, I know. I already knew you would beforehand. Love you anyway. It's cool. Now let's talk about the future. Like, your past is that I've separated your sin far from east from west. And I have to remind my enemy, the devil, of that all the time, because he comes back. But remember this and remember that, Rob, and you did this and you said that. It's like, no. God's forgiven me of that. And now I don't have to dwell on the past and on mistakes of the past because I can't do anything about them anyway. All I can do is focus on the future. And God's there saying, like, I've got this future for you. I've got this plan. You know what I mean? And who knows what great, cool things we could go do, and how many people we could help. Let's do it. Let's get to work, And so, so it's like this happy face, a little bit of meditation, reading, note meditation, reading some of the Bible. And then it's just wrapping it up with prayer. And that's just where I try to take time. You usually feel better when you do things for other people, right? When you get out of yourself and you look to help others. And so prayer is when I really try to pray for like everyone I know, whether they want me to or not, that's been shared on my heart for something, that I feel or that they've shared with me that they're going through. Something that, and that's time where I really just try to go to God for other people. and when my wife and I wrap it up with, she has one that she's learned about the archangels of protection. And I don't know them as well as her, but there's like Michael on your right side. You can visualize throughout the day of like, to protect you and strengthen you. And there's, and it might sound hokey, because to a lot, because for a big part of my life, I would have rolled my eyes at it, even though I knew a lot about it. But I feel that protection, that sense of like, I can face this day. And when someone's a jerk to me, I don't have to instantly throw my middle finger up and be like, bow up and get like, oh yeah. I could just be like, that's their day. They might not be a jerk. They might just be having their worst day ever, and instead of me responding in a negative way, I can be like, kind of envision the angels, God there with me, and being different than how I would be. And I fail still, it's still occasionally it's going to happen. But in those victories, when you don't fail and someone's having a crap day and they were a jerk to you, and you're like, hey man, you all right? Instead of responding back like, oh yeah, well, let me tell you something, like, hey man, it's cool, relax, like, I get it, I've had those kind of days, man, like, you good? Is there anything I can do for you? I mean, it just disarms, right? It just takes the whole situation and they're like, don't know what to do with it. And you can't fake it. You have to genuinely care. And that's part of that prayer, and God please live through me. Let me glorify you. Let me serve you. And now it's back to that life of service. It's no longer about me. My dad, he passed from cancer before I retired. So 4 or 5 years ago. And, he wasn't a flawless human. None of us are. Definitely made his share of mistakes, but especially late in his life, he had a very profound walk with God. And he taught me something that I write certain things on the top of my daily to-do list. And one of them is straight from my dad, is it's not about you. You know what I mean? Like, look to serve others, look to help others. How many times in life, like, you hear a child, I want this toy, I want this bike, I want to go to McDonald's, I, me. And like, as we grow, I think the ultimate maturity, and I'm not there, but it's like walking with Christ in a way that says, it's not about me. I don't care. I want to serve God and glorify God. And however you want to use me. And it just takes, to me, a lot of stress off, because it's like, I don't have to, I don't have to be this phenomenal, perfect person, because I'm not. And all I have to do is just be obedient, The other one's hold fast, that sailor tattoo on the knuckles. You know what I mean? Literally just like, don't quit. And body, mind, spirit. I stole that one from Chasing Mavericks, as a surfer. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yep.
But I love that movie, he tells him, like, if you're going to go tackle these monster waves, it comes back to you talking about performance and being able to do incredible things. And if you're going to go tackle Mavericks and ride one of the biggest, most fiercest, most deadly waves on the planet, you know what I mean? You can't just physically train for it. Psychologically, spiritually, body, mind, spirit, you need to have your affairs in order, so to speak, so that when you approach this, you're centered, you're clean, you're dialed in, and you're not like worried about fear. You've already addressed that. You're going to high perform. And the other one I got from my wife, and it's from the Bible, is day 41. And throughout all of scripture, mostly because God's people ignored him. And I love that too. I read this stuff and I'm like, these people are so stupid. But I'm like, yeah, I've done the same thing. They ignored him. They went against his word. They're like, nah, we're going to do it our own way. And they struggled for sometimes 40 years or 40 days, but often throughout, but it's not 100%, but oftentimes day 41, you know what I mean? Like, as it got closer, they were realizing, yeah, this isn't working. Our way is kind of dumb. We're just struggling. We're wandering in the wilderness. They got real. God always welcomes you back. And like day 41's coming. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what's going on in your struggles, whether it be something dumb on the boat or finances or whatever, you're struggling. But like, it may not be a literal 41 number, but day 41's coming. Like that better moment, that redemption, that like, wow, I needed this. Here on the boat, I've been struggling. We lost an engine about 1.5 years ago. It's a major problem. Had to haul a 2,200 pound block out of the boat, get that all replaced, get it back in. A lot of high angle and truck work went into that. Get that back in. And then we took a lightning strike, which fried all our electronics and our controls. Had to deal with insurance, got all that replaced, and then the transmission behind the new motor died. So we had to get the new transmission, which is now sitting downstairs and not installed yet. I'm working on that later. But as far as all the electronics, I had done that job 6 years ago from a former lightning strike. 6 years later, we have a new one. And I was so not looking forward to doing that because it was such a challenge. And I really had to stretch myself to do it the first time. And I don't have them. I'm not a retired cardiologist. I can't just pay someone to do this. I have to learn it. You got to do it. And I wasn't looking forward to it. The job was killing me. I was putting it off. And when I would work on it, I was mad. I wasn't getting anywhere. And it was this albatross that I just wasn't solving. It was a problem that I was just like, it was getting ahead of me. And out of the blue Monday, I was like, I'm getting up, drinking my coffee. I'm not going to get a workout in. I'm going to spend a 10, 12 hour, 14. I don't care. I am going to focus on this problem. And I wrote on my calendar for the whole week, from Monday of this week through Friday, minus this time with you. That's all I care about. Like, it has to get done by Friday. Enough's enough, right? Like, get it done. And Monday on the calendar I'm old. The paper desk calendars was day 41 of the year. And I put like a 10 hour day at it. And I'm usually, my brain imagines is worst case scenario. Like, this is going to go wrong. Well, you're going to put it together and still you're going to have all these components that fail. Like this new engine you bought, it's probably going to fail. You know what I mean? What are you going to do when it falls apart? Like, my brain always imagines worst case scenario. And I think a lot of that comes from our background and our job. We're trained, that worst case scenario, plan on it, And, but I threw a full day at it Monday and fired everything up, expecting like multiple failures and like it's going to take the rest of the week. And James, 99% of it worked like flawlessly. Amazing. I have like one or two little hiccups to chase, and it just blew my mind because I'm like, wow. I'm like, and it happened to be day 41. It was really kind of cool. I was like, all right. I kind of looked up, like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I do feel a difference. I'm flawed. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to mess up. I'm not an example of any sort, but me personally, I feel a major, major difference by coming back to what I knew to be true as a young man and coming back to truths. And it's a fight. It's a fight every day. I still catch myself getting selfish, getting annoyed, getting like, what? Getting in traffic, like somebody pisses me off, and sometimes the finger still comes out, But it's like, for the most part, I'm feeling a difference, and I'm feeling like a desire. It's not a chore. It's a desire to want to follow this meditation and this walk with God that I feel offers me my best hope at a joyful future.
I've had this conversation with a couple of people recently. It just kind of struck me when I look at my very, very kind of surface level understanding of the Bible, because I was exposed to Christianity when I was young, that I can't help but feel like the Old Testament is like, hey, here's how we used to do it. And then the New Testament is like, but here's when we started doing, kindness, compassion, service, so if you want to avoid all the pain and heartache, then just skip to the new part. And I honestly feel in my heart, in the fire service, and even, in the Western world, because I don't think every country is dealing with the divisiveness and the lack of purpose that we are in some of the more fortunate developed countries. But I feel like we're at the dawn of day 41. I do everything. Everyone's going to doom and gloom, and there's going to be civil war. We're going to kill each other. I disagree. I think there's about to be an awakening where the majority, that was a kind of silent majority in the fire service or in the States or in Europe, we're kind of waking up and going, well, wait a second. There's a common denominator here. We always seem to get a few people that fuck it up for everyone else. They want all the power. They want all the money. They set us against each other on whatever the pigeonholes are. But I feel like, and I feel like there's an awakening. I think there's an awakening in the fire service, understanding the work week, and needing to address mental health, needing fitness standards, all these things. The way we've been doing it, Old Testament fire service isn't working. I think we really need to lean in, because, as you said, we are good people. I've always said that I adore the fire service, which is why I still do what I do. Fighting for an environment that I'll never get to experience myself. but they are beautiful human beings that toe the line and say, I want to be a cop, I want to be a firefighter, I want to be a paramedic, I want to be a dispatcher, I want to work in corrections. The people are doing for the right reason, which is most of them. So they deserve the environment that allows them to be, even greater versions of themselves. So it's funny
Yep.
that you use that analogy, because I am an incurable, angry optimist. I feel like in our profession, we're almost there. And I feel like even in the country, and this is why I'm working on this TV show, I want that to be part of this thing. And again, that's what my conversations with God, I am a conduit as well. And I want to create something that's going to sow seeds in households all over the world and let everyone begin their kind of healing journey that way. But, I couldn't agree more. I love that kind of day 41 mentality. And I personally feel like we're kind of like day 39 and
Yeah. Right.
it's actually going to be beautiful when we get over the horizon.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. That's great, man. That's awesome.
So I want to throw some closing questions at you before I let you go. The first one
All
I
right.
love to ask, is there a book or are there books that you love to recommend? It can be related to our discussion today or completely unrelated.
Here's where I'm gonna make a confession that if you could reach through the screen and punch me, you might would. I haven't read your book yet. I want to.
Oh, no,
I
no,
don't read.
that's not a loaded question.
I know that's not what you were. I know that's not what you were fishing for. I've been feeling guilty this whole time, so it was going to come out at some point. I've actually already even looked it up on Amazon, so I know where to get it. Honestly, I used to read a lot more than I do these days as far as other books, and I've just been so busy. When I retired, people said, "Oh, you're going to be bored." I'm like, "No, I live on a 42-year-old trawler, broke maybe, not bored." There's like 10 different things I should be doing every day besides workouts. And in retirement, that's been awesome. I still try to get in all my workouts and stay very disciplined with that. I'm still surfing, and then of course everything I need to be working on in this boat that keeps me very, very engaged. I still get up at like 6:30, 6:45 every morning and, put in a full day, so I'm feeling very fulfilled. I'm not having a lot of time to read, to be honest with you, but a book that meant a lot to me a ways back was by Jocko Willink. I can't remember which one because he's written a couple. I think it was Leadership something. I like studying different leaders and their styles and their thoughts on it.
Was it Extreme Ownership?
Extreme Ownership. That's exactly what it was. Thank you. There's a line in it that I'll always remember, and it helps to serve towards a mentality of personal discipline. And it's that it's simple, but it's not easy. It's just that one line. And at first you're like, okay, whatever, that's a little riddle. Who cares? But he framed it up with like, everyone knows what they need to do to be healthy, eat better, exercise. It's simple, but it's not easy. Like everyone knows, what they need to do to, like, on an operations plan when he was a Navy SEAL, like we need to go in, do this, avoid this, make sure this person doesn't see us, kill that guy, extract this person and get out. It's like a 4-point plan, and it's pretty simple, but it's not easy. Getting in and executing it is going to be a whole nother level. And, he broke down a lot of ownership, as a leader, which I really valued. It annoys me a lot when people point fingers and, oh, no, it wasn't my fault. It was, I try personally like to own it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, no, that was me. Not proud of it, but yeah, that was on me. I really enjoyed that book because just the way he owns things. Obviously, he's a phenomenal leader and a heck of a human. But I really like that line. It's simple. It's not easy. It's like, I know I need to get up in time to get everything I need to get done in the day plus my workout. But when that alarm goes off, it's really easy to hit snooze. You know what I mean? So it's simple to set it the night before. It's just not easy when it goes off to obey it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I really liked that book. And just from that perspective. But, I guess probably the other one I've read prior to that was Green Eggs and Ham. It's been a minute. So I need to brush off. I need to brush off the illiteracy that I need to get back in the books for sure.
Well, Dr. Seuss was a genius too. So another great book.
Yeah.
What about television, films, and documentaries? Any of those that you love?
Really enjoying a show that we've recently gotten into every night. And it's awesome because there's like a trillion seasons of it. I mean, like 12 or 14. And so we're able to watch like 2, 3 episodes a night, and never run out of anything to watch, called Alone on History Channel. And it's like these survivalists that they put out in the woods and competing to who can stay the longest. And they put them in these really just harsh environments. And they can only bring like 10 items. And so they basically have to get all their own food and build their own shelter and figure it out, right? And been enjoying that one because, one, I like watching how people manage stress and hardship and how they think. Two, it's fun to judge. Sarah and I will be sitting there after dinner eating like a Nutter Butter, and somebody's like frozen to death. Somebody's frozen to death, like eating the guts out of a squirrel, and they're quitting, and we're like, "You bitch!" So it's kind of fun, like from your comfort of your own couch, to make fun of, what I mean, like in a fun way. But also, like, it makes you grateful. You come away from it, and you're like, you turn the tap on, and run a glass of water. These people have to go like get the seawater, get the water. If they can find a freshwater source, boil it, build a fire, use their sticks, you know what I mean? Do all the like primitive stuff. It takes them 45 minutes to an hour and a half, to make something drinkable. And even then it's this very finite supply, and how much weight they're losing and their calorie burn and everything they're doing. And they have to figure offset on getting food, and they're eating an ant. Like, I know this looks disgusting, but it's protein, or they're gutting a squirrel and they're excited because it's not ants, and you're like, wow, I'm pretty blessed. You know what I mean? Like, it frames it up. Also frames up how much stuff we don't need. You know what I mean? So I've been enjoying that. Like we're mentalists. We live on a boat, but we still have so much crap we don't need. We could still do so much better on getting rid of stuff, and we're working on that. I like that show. And then I've always just been a fan of really any movie or show, like the Star Trek. I never watched the shows growing up, but the movies, with like the more modern ones that are less nerdy. But because it's just like there's this frame up of like a rogue kind of officer leader, Chris Pratt or whatever, with like impossible odds and rising above it, and winning. Like you said, I like to sometimes, I don't know, enjoy the win. We didn't get them in our career a lot, so you watch those movies for a disconnect because you're like, this is this really challenging, unwinnable scenario that they're going to win, but it's just how they're going to do it and whatever else. So yeah, those are enjoyable and fun, and they sort of take some stress off. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, next question. Is there a person that you'd recommend to come on this podcast as a guest to speak to the first responders, military, and associated professions of the world?
That's a tough one because I have a high respect for a lot of the folks we worked with. And I could probably name 5 or 8. I don't know if they'd be willing, and I don't know if they would really be a good fit or not. I'm probably going to be your longest podcast because I'm long-winded, and a guy like that. One of the ones I worked with, Ramel Palma. He'd been a Marine in Afghanistan and Iraq. You know what I mean? Like, and he had moved up to a higher level of leadership there. I don't know his exact rank, but he had lost, and I don't know if he's willing to talk about it, if he's ready to talk about it. But I know he had lost, on that battlefield, right? And that trauma and survival and drama, and then as coming home and being a fireman, and he's a high level guy. He takes his job seriously, knows his job. He doesn't accept anything less, than exactly the way it should be. But I don't know if he'd be comfortable or willing. So I don't mean to put anyone under the bus. But he's got a lot of background and experience with a lot of, I think, that others might relate to. There's just so many, you know what I mean? At my last station, both Carl's Torchon and Jen, why am I not thinking of Jen's last name? She was my engineer. She was awesome. She probably kept me from getting fired like 10 or 12 different times because she'd just look at me like, don't say it, Jen Taylor. I knew it would come to me. I don't know if either one of them would be willing to talk, of things they've been through. I know she was there for oh God, I'm going to feel real bad now. He was a guy on B shift. I was A shift at 85. Really great guy. And I just feel like a complete ass for not thinking of his name at the top of my head. But he had gotten very dark and very depressed, and Jen noticed it. And Jen went and talked with him and reached out to him. And it's not comfortable. It's not easy to do that. And Alex, that's what Alex, I can't think of his last name. I think it's Alex. He credits her to saving his life, and Jen's been through a lot, and she's a really good person. Like I said, she's one that probably saved my career towards the end by just looking at me like, don't do it, But so I don't know. Maybe Torshawn's just somebody I just respect. He's just brilliant, And he's somebody that's just one of the smartest humans I've ever come across. You could almost just keep going, because there's so many great people we worked with that of personal hardship they've endured, and here they are, still showing up, still making it work one way or the other. And a lot of those people are in my prayers every day, because I don't know how well I hit it. I don't know if I hit it well or not, but I was hiding it for a long time. And some of these people that are going through things, I pray for them, that if they're hiding it, and I know to them, it might sound so weird coming from me, like, dude, Rob, we knew you were a wild man. Like, yeah, you're not wrong. But still, I pray for him, because, I want the best for him. I want peace. That's what I want for anyone. I want peace in their soul. I want them to be able to look in the mirror and smile back a little bit and feel like, it's okay. I'm gonna be okay, and kind of feel a little bit like, and I'm okay. Like, I'm not this terrible POS. Like, I'm okay. That's all I want for anyone. And it's funny enough, on that show alone, season 2 or whatever, 3, I don't know, a former operator, I think he was a Ranger sniper, was a contestant on it and taught, evasion and all this. And so they're really putting themselves out there, because they're going on this show to compete, being filmed. They film themselves, so if you fail, to me, that's a big step to put yourself out there like that. But on day 22, he talked about how it didn't make sense to most to do this calorie burn when food is scarce and, you're trying to survive and outlast everyone else. And every action you take needs to have a why and a reason for the burn. Is it building your shelter? Well, that's a good one. Is it going on a small hunt? That's a good one, especially if it produces food. But there was a mountain behind him, and he decided on day 22 to climb it. And he did it for his own, mental. He said, like, you can get bored out here and go crazy. And a lot of contestants, that's what takes them out. They take themselves out of the game because they miss their family, and they lose it because there's no one to talk to. And they get inside their head so bad, they just lose it. And he's like, I'm doing this because I've lost so many brothers. And he had done some suicide counseling and some stuff in the military, and so many brothers and sisters and so many others. And he's like, I'm going to climb that mountain today. I don't care if it takes me out of the competition. It's there. It needs to be done. And I want to prove that I can do it, and then prove to others, like, no matter how hard it is, you can make the climb. And James, I was watching that. And like, I know most people watching it, Sarah's watching it, and she's like, this guy's an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, that's going to be a huge calorie burn. And you might be getting 200-300 calories a day, in this environment. And you're going to go expend like this is not tactically wise. And, it wasn't, but I had tears in my eyes when he made the top, because he was just like 22 a day. That's when I did the math. I was like, that's over 8,000. It just, man, it just breaks my heart. I just want others to experience peace, especially those that have experienced nothing but trauma, war, blood, death. Man, we've done our time, and I don't want you should never feel. People pick on me sometimes for 25, and we were joking, but James, that day you talked about, most people, and I know you know what I mean, this is what you do for a living these days, don't experience a tenth of that one day. And if they did, they would need psychological counseling for that one moment in their life. It comes as blind to us that occasionally, if I'm out with my wife, or before my father-in-law passed, we were somewhere and we were actually on one of my fishing boats. We were in the port. This was way, way, way back. and there was these guys on fishing on a boat, and I was kind of looking at them. They had the engine cover up, and they're using starting ether, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, they're in the water on this boat in Port Canaveral, and I'm watching them kind of like try to spray start this motor. I'm like, if they mess this up, they got nowhere to go. If that goes boom, they're on the, they're going in the water. And sure shit, boom, fireball. I'm just like, really? And one of them got a little burned on his arm, and the other one went to the front of the boat. One jumped in the water right away. So, I just pulled the boat over there, and I told Sarah, get on the radio, hail the Coast Guard. I taught her radio protocol, so she knew how to do that on a boat. Hail the Coast Guard, tell them there's a vessel on fire. There's two people in the water. And I got close to him, got a ring out, got one in, got in the water, got the other one in, packaged up the guy's burn a little bit. When the Coast Guard showed up to my boat, he was like, you a fireman? I'm like, yeah. Because there wasn't much. He was like kind of shaking his head because the rookie wanted to package up the burn. It was already kind of pretty well sterilely wrapped up, But, we went to dinner afterwards. We put the boat away and we went out to dinner. And I'm just kind of like wanting to talk about, I don't know, who the Red Sox are playing next week or, whatever, right? And my father-in-law is like sitting there with his mouth open. And I was like, what? And he goes, what just happened? His mind was just like, he couldn't, it was just like, that boat just blew up in front of us and two guys went in the water and we pulled them out and addressed injuries and got them turned over to the Coast Guard. And I'm like, I was thinking like, yeah, that was like 2 hours ago. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? Like the stuff we see, and that one had a very positive outcome, but the stuff we see, it can't be underestimated. You know what I mean? And I know you're the counselor, but I don't ever want you to ever let the enemy come in and try to attack you or discount your years of service or no, like you did it, and you were a real medic, not just some paper tiger like me at the end of my career. You know what I mean? Like you did it and you did things that most can't do without being destroyed. That if people tried to do, they just couldn't even fathom. And now here you are on the other side of it, trying to help and make a difference and make a change. You know what I mean? Like don't ever for a second discount yourself or feel anything less than the best.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I really do. And I don't, and the way I've kind of framed it in my mind is even though there's that loss of identity initially running the calls, because I never even wanted to promote. Like I
miss that sometimes.
I loved it.
Do you miss that?
Loading the hose after a good fire or cleaning saws or, just simply wiping all the blood off the back, as nasty as it is. And, knowing that you got, because I mean, I said about my black cloud, a lot of people pre-code, we did save. It was just if you went to cardiac arrest and James was your medic, you were fucked. But I think you said about the angel, I seem to have the Reaper with me the whole time. But, no, but joking apart, but then I realized it was the same mission. And going back to what you said about most of us put on the uniform because we are kind people and we do want to make a difference. And there's psychology and some other things behind it as well, which can be an absolute, reinforcing strength if we see it with the right lens. But there's more than one way to make the world better, and you don't have to wear the uniform or keep wearing the uniform. So what I realized is, as a force multiplier, to take a special forces term, if you can help first responders, imagining how many lives they're then going to go on and save in their career, and you've helped be a part of that. Now, some people promote and some people teach at fire colleges, and this was, I guess, the way that I was supposed to transition from the fire service. So I don't look back, negatively with the 14 years. I look back fondly at it.
It's your calling, brother. You do something and you do it so well that it's your calling. And you're awesome at it. I miss, it's funny. I don't really miss, I think this is a Carl Longism, but when he was asked, about his retirement a little while after, he said, how did he put it? I want to try to get it right. I don't miss the circus. I miss the clowns. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't miss the circus of Orange County. I don't miss a lot. And, look, it's easy to bag on them, and they still are easy to bag on. But there was still a lot of great people even higher up. And in all, there's no such thing as a perfect agency. And they served me well. It was a great career. I'm thankful for it. And there's still some very good people there, even kind of, I won't go too high. But, the thing is, it's like I miss the brotherhood and the sisterhood. I miss the trash talk. Nobody in society seems to really be able to handle our level of smartassery. You know what I mean? Nope. And I kind of, And if you talk in public to people the way we talk to each other as firemen, you usually going to get in a fight. You're either going to get in a fight or like no one's going to want to ever talk to you again. So I miss some of that level camaraderie. And more than anything, I miss jumping on the rig, throwing the headsets en route to like a legitimate fire. You know what I mean? And just like knowing the crew that I got, the people that I got, like game on, just feeling confident and like, let's do it. Just that excitement. And then I missed the call on the way back on the headsets, all the laughter and the bullshit. And they're like, somebody on the headset, like, what was so-and-so thinking? Did you see that? You know what I mean? And just all for sure. I missed that. It took me like 6 or 8 months after being retired before it hit me that I'm never gonna have a pair of boots sitting next to a rig again with a coat sitting on the handle, and a helmet on a dash. You know what I mean? Like I'm never going to be set up, ready to put it on, get to work. And it kind of made me a little sad. And my wife was like, "You could volunteer." And I'm like, "No." I'm like,
let's not be crazy now.
Right. I'm like, sorry. Hats off to volunteers. You're doing this for free. Good for you. I honestly feel like, I'm pretty young. We're retired. There's a bunch of things I could do for money and for side business and things like that when it comes the time. And I'm not retired for good. I'm going to have to look at some other things, and that's fine. But I have come to the full healthy acceptance. It won't be anything 911 related. I don't want to work a dispatch. I don't want to go work for a small department somewhere. Like, I'm good. I don't want to feed any more of that. I miss it to an extent. I love it. It was a blast. I was blessed to be there. But I'm good. It would not be good for me to go back. So, literally like my next job might be, welcome to West Marine. Yeah. The bilge pumps are on aisle 5, I don't know.
Well, I think there's also, when you transition out of a career like this, one of your missions is to also undo the damage, especially in the era that we worked in. So catching up on sleep, maintaining your fitness, getting good blood work. I mean, all these things. So to put yourself back in the meat grinder after making it out, that's you got to question those choices. But what else can you do? And within that, how can you continue to serve? And I think that's just it. The transition. We don't do a very good job in the fire service. Most people do teach at the fire academy. You're still kind of hanging on, clinging for dear life to that identity, and it's it has its purpose. If you're an old salt and you got a lot to teach still, then brilliant. But there are so many other ways that you can make the world a little bit better without killing yourself in the process.
Yep.
All right. Well, the last question before we make sure everyone knows where to find you: what do you do to decompress?
I play guitar, and believe it or not, I actually sing a little bit. And most of the time, the water doesn't shut off in the shower. I love music, and I play covers. I've written a few. They're not that great. But honestly, working out is huge for my mental health because I feel good. I've gotten that burn, whether I go for a run or I go lift or, I do a lot of calisthenics. Working out's huge for mental health but decompress, really, I'd have to say I pick my guitar up and I just play. I just play and sing, and I don't care that I'm in no danger of ever being discovered or making it. Like that's not what it's about. It's just about hitting that one part of a song where you can close your eyes because you actually know it well enough, and you're not having to look at the music and breathe deep and try to actually sing that next part pretty okay. And to yourself, it feels good. It sounds good to your ears. It's probably going to make a dog howl, but it sounds good to you, and you feel good. My wife hasn't divorced me over it yet. And, so honestly, music would be one of my big ones. The other is surfing. I grew up surfing, and my wife and I went to Costa Rica this summer for our 20th, even though we were on like year 22, for our 20th anniversary and for my 50th birthday. And we had a connection with a friend, hooked us up with a pretty good deal. We almost just couldn't say no. And I'd always wanted to surf there. So I still get in the water. I'm kind of a weenie in the winter because it has to be really good for me to put on a wetsuit. And I have so much here I need to be doing. But surfing's spiritual. You're getting in the ocean and with all the toothy critters and a lot of things way faster, stronger, and, you're not the apex anymore. You're definitely not top of the food chain. You're a slow, moving air breathing mammal. And, to me, it's about having that respect of my environment and getting in it, and then catching some waves, and riding them. There's just something very pure. There's no boat pulling me. There's no, like, I have to get my timing. I have to feel it. I have to be in sync. And if I'm a wreck, mentally, and I'm not going to have a good day surfing. My brain's just 27 different places. Same thing with playing guitar. If I'm mad, I can't pick the guitar up and be peaceful and creative. Like, I just can't do it. I have to just kind of like almost calm down beforehand. But then if I've still got a little bit left over that I'm still kind of struggling with, the music or the surfing really starts to speak to me, and I start breathing different, and I start going like, yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I can relate. I'm not going to sign any record labels by any means, but I play guitar and piano just so I can sing along, and
we need to get together and play sometime, brother.
There we go. We'll tell each other we sound amazing.
Yeah, exactly. If you're ever over towards Cape Canaveral, I'm like 3 miles from the cruise ships.
Okay.
Please let me know. It'd be good just to have a drink or a dinner or whatever with you. Absolutely.
Actually, we do. That's one of my favorite things to decompress is the cruises, just because, as a Florida resident, the right time, you can get them so cheap. And the moment they lose Florida on the horizon, none of the cell phones work anymore. And I love it. So
I know. Isn't it great?
All right.
Great. Yeah.
Well, for people listening, if they want to reach out to you, where are the best places online to do that?
Well, I'm on Facebook under my name, under Rob Moore. The boat, I put some things on there under MV, as in like Mike Victor, Lunacy, Motor Vessel Lunacy. My phone number, if anyone needed to talk, especially, I mean it, I want to be there for anyone, is 321-624-1907. That's it. As we get traveling, we're hoping to get traveling this summer. I'm going to keep the Facebook page with the boat page kind of updated with some adventures. And there's even an app that tracks ships, like under their AIS number. And we have one. We have like a commercial number. So if somebody wanted to be that way about it, they could, I'd give them our vessel name, and they could look up on their phone with that app and be like, oh, today they're in North Carolina or Chesapeake Bay or, St. Thomas. I don't know.
Brilliant. Well, I want to say thank you so much. I say this a lot when people come on here and they talk about, some of the darkest traumas, some of the darkest times that they had. There's obviously an element of kind of ripping the Band-Aid off and, opening the wound again. But as you alluded to, knowing how many people this is going to resonate with, and especially, knowing your personality in Orange County, you were, one of the ones that people label as, oh, that's the last person I would think would do insert thing here. But more often than not, a lot of those people are the ones that are struggling the most. And early on in the podcast, I shit you not, almost every person that reached out was the shaved head, tattooed, muscular dude. Like, the air quotes last person. So there's so much value to this courageous vulnerability that you've, given us today. So I want to thank you so much, not only for that, but for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
Brother, thank you much. Please stay in touch. Like I said, we'll do a concert or a lunch or something one of these minutes.